Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Council Chambers. Today is March 25th, and today's the first meeting we've had since spring has sprung. As you can tell, spring is always accompanied by frost coming out of the ground and potholes that fill our streets. I have to say that AT and our staff are doing a not too bad job of getting those filled up as soon as possible, so thank you for that. Hey, members of council, there's an agenda before you. If I can ask that the business items be renumbered, so 9.7, 9.8 will become 9.1, 9.2, and the rest will just fall in that subsequent order. Okay. With that, administration, anything to add? No. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to, oh, sorry, I needed a motion for that agenda. So, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, I have to go back now. That we accept the agenda as presented with the modifications.
Yes. So, the agenda as amended.
Yeah, the Town Council adopt the March 25th, 2019 regular council meeting agenda as presented with the additions, or amendments, pardon me.
With amendments as amended. Thank you.
Sorry.
All in favor? Yes. Thank you. Moving on to the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on any item that's not on the current agenda. Is there anybody in council chambers like to talk to council regarding something that's not on the agenda tonight? Okay. Last call for public input. Anybody in the chambers like to speak to council regarding something that's not on the current agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. There's no presentations or delegations. There is no statutory public hearings today either. So moving on to the adoption of council minutes, the RCM of March 11th. Councillor Mattis, please.
Council approve the March 11th, 2019 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, if you guys had a chance to read over it, any errors or omissions? Okay, see none, I didn't see any either, so I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1, the Stony Plain FCSS Board. And who was on there? Councillor Mattis.
Do you want me to read?
Yes.
That Town Council received the Stony Plain and Family Support Services minutes of January 9th, 2019 for information and be placed on file.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, you've had the chance to read the Stony Plain FCSS minutes from January 9th. Any questions to the board appointee? Since there's none, I do have a question to the Councillor Mattis. I've noticed on future meeting dates, there is a couple things that says important dates to note. One is the April 23rd annual presentation to Stony Plain Town Council, and also September 23rd, the 2020 budget presentation to Town Council. However, we have an agreement with Parkland County to provide FCSS for them in this region. Why is there no presentations to Parkland County?
That's a very good question, and I will ask the director and get back to you on that.
Thank you. Councillor Lori?
Yes, Your Worship, I'm just noticing here, or maybe I've never noticed it before, but the last 4 words there, 5, and be placed on file, is that something new that we are now saying in our motions? Because before it just, accepted for information, and then now we've stated and be placed on file. I don't recollect that, but that's could be
Yes,
me.
that is, go ahead.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Loy, that's correct. Back when we changed, it's just been a couple of meetings now, when we accept all the informations for the boards and committee, that this was recommended wording, that you accept them all and they all be placed on file. So that's the standard wording we've been using since that change.
So it'll be future. Yeah, thank you very much, administration. I appreciate that.
Any other questions regarding the Stony Plain SSS minutes? No? Okay. I don't have any others, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. That is carried. Moving on, there is no bylaws to deal with today, so moving on to business items. And again, we've changed the business item, so we'll go to 9.7, which is now 9.1. The Willow Park Natural Area. Councillor Matties.
Notice of motion that Town Council direct administration to provide an update regarding 3 of the town's 4 basic strategies for the management and preservation of the Willow Park Natural Area as originally presented at the April 26, 2010 regular council meeting.
Okay. Okay, do you want to speak to it, Councillor Matties, before I open the floor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. With regards to this, what we are asking for is information regarding 3 of the 4 basic strategies. Basic strategy number 1, what is Stony Plains maintenance philosophy or body of knowledge which will allow for native grasses, plants, and trees to flourish while controlling invasive species and noxious weeds? Secondly, basic strategy number 2, what strategic planting of a variety of native species of trees, shrubs, and grasses have been completed to enhance the biodiversity, providing sustainable long-term growth and a natural habitat for birds. And basic strategy number 4, details regarding Stony Plains' ongoing educational efforts to engage the surrounding neighborhood and encourage involvement of our citizens in preserving, enhancing, and maintaining the natural areas for this community. And just to give you a little bit of rationale as to why I have put this motion forward, I'm just going to refer to my notes. When we refer to our municipal development plan, the municipal development plan has number 1 as its first theme is environmental responsibility. It speaks of the purpose of the municipal development plan, which is to promote a complete sustainable community. On page 22 of the municipal development plan, which unfortunately you don't have here, but the town's operations and development will pay careful consideration to the natural environment. And under the municipal development plan on page 53, it has a map which designates parkland and natural areas separating, and they're separate on the map. Finally, if we go to page 209 of the municipal development plan, if we have the municipal plan here, sorry about that. The municipal development plan on page, if you refer to page 209 of 256, and it refers to the natural living systems on section number 2. It 2-1 says conserve and restore natural living systems through an ecological network approach. And if you look over on the far box, it says we should develop policies to assess, conserve, protect, and enhance natural areas as an integrated and connected natural ecosystem. And then it refers on 2-2, it refers to riparian areas. So in terms of what we would like to see is information with regards to our existing policies to ensure that this ecosystem is being supported in the manner that it was intended to as a natural area in this community.
Thank you. Members of Council, I'll open up the floor. Questions and comments. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When this item came up as a notice of motion, I was wondering about natural areas and exactly how it compares, how our natural area compares to others. So I did a little research on on the Wagner natural area. That's just a little bit east of Spruce Grove off the Yellowhead, and it's located in the county of Parkland. So they have a very good reference material and a citizenship group that looks at the Wagner natural area, and they have a board that kind of makes decisions about what will happen. They have a newsletter that goes out every month. They have funding that comes in, which is very different than our natural area. But it got me to thinking about our public engagement strategy and some of the grassroots kind of committees that have formed lately. For instance, the Friends of the Dog Park, and how they got together and using some of our town staff resources, which was a very important part of this whole engagement process. They came up with a few recommendations. They were very clear that their role in this whole dog park was not to tell administration or council what to do, but they did a survey, they noted some areas of concern, they asked people what they thought, and then they came and presented to council, and I thought a very good presentation. They did speak to our administration. They worked with Public Works to kind of define what could happen there, what should happen there, and maybe future projects. I thought the whole process was just extremely well handled. And I'm wondering if that isn't maybe the way that we can kind of come to terms with some of our natural area. As Councillor Matties noted, there's a part in our 2010 strategy that says come up with a philosophy of natural area and how to maintain it and how to actually, what's the philosophy of our natural area? The one question I have, and perhaps administration could answer that right now, is what makes our Willow Park natural area any different from any of the other areas that our Public Works takes care of? Do they cut the grass in a different way? Do they plant trees and shrubs of a native species in there that they don't do somewhere else? So that whole philosophy of what our natural area is and what it should be, I think is a very basic premise to dealing with this whole area of our Willow Park natural area. And in my mind, one of the ways that we could get to that philosophy is by having some of our really concerned residents who are very knowledgeable in this whole process, working with other citizens and forming a group that could be the Friends of the Willow Park natural area. Mr. Mayor, I don't know where you want to take that suggestion, if I should make a motion to direct administration to look into it, or if you want to just take it as an idea that I have. But I think to get at the meat of what's happening in our natural area, we, number one, have to have a philosophy. We, number two, have to have money. So in our corporate plan, a designated sum for new plants. It stated that right in our 2010 original strategy. And so those are areas that I think perhaps our community can come to, and the educational piece. Very important that I think our community can come together with and maybe help to move this natural area into the spot that it should or could be. Mr. Mayor, I think I asked a question as to the philosophy and whether or not we have one.
So Councillor Bennett, you did have a lot of good comments there as well, and even referencing what just recently occurred with the Friends of the Dog Park. As you said, that was a citizen engagement group that thought that they had some recommendations, and they got together with our staff and said, okay, this is, and they did a lot of work in terms of surveys and everything to see what everybody wanted. And they came back with recommendations. They didn't say this is what we needed to do, and then that left it on council's table to plan and budget for it properly, as you mentioned in the strategic planning, because everything has a cost to it. And if we, change and we do things ad hoc all the time, then our strategic planning is not very, very good, and we don't have the same direction and drive for the community as we should in terms of efficiency. So let's just see what the rest of council has to add to this conversation and debate first. But you asked a question regarding what does Public Works do in this area that is different than what they do in other areas. And living back there, I have a few that I've seen that's different, but I'll let administration go ahead.
Now, Your Worship, through you to answer the question, I think it's a natural area in name, and we do what we can under the current restrictions and the situation in the natural area. A pipeline did go through there, so that took some of the naturalness out of the area, and it became more of a revised area, which is then has to be maintained. And of course, there are weeds and birds and other complications which make it challenging for us in relation to how we manage the weeds in relation to water bodies and things like that. So there definitely are challenges with how we look after that area, and so it is unique because of the name and because of our approach is attempting to be natural, but I guess based on some of the undefined challenges we've got. We would appreciate more discussion on the philosophy and the approach going forward, because that would provide greater clarity for us and how we can meet expectations on service levels and things like that.
Okay, thank you. And one of the things I've noticed living in there is we do not cut down in the weeds and anything until after the migratory birds have left as part of it. And other areas of town that have parks and stuff that are mowed down is when necessary. Okay. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just more so some general commentary, and I agree with a lot of what Councillor Bennett has said in respect to his citizen group and talking about our philosophy, but I look at this as almost a little bit too narrow. The Willow Park Natural Area is only one area of our town, and though other areas of our town are not designated as natural areas, a lot of the things that are brought up in this, such as riparian zones, noxious weeds, etc., that exists throughout our entire town. And so to me, there's a much larger scope and a much larger consideration. I do think the natural area has some specific features, and there may be some specific items that need to be considered within it. But I do think, as we heard the general manager talk about service level, I think defining that service level and coming up with the philosophy that would guide that and lead that, not just for the natural area, but throughout the entire town, is certainly a conversation that needs to happen. And given that we are redoing our MDP this year, I do think we have some great opportunities to do that. We are going to look at our strategic plan and hopefully pass our strategic plan again here. And, again, one of the comments that's noted, I believe, in Basic Strategy 4, again, is reflected right in our strategic plan, where it states under environmental responsibility, we commit to protect and manage our environmental impact, and one of the key actions is progress our environmental initiatives through educational programming and promotion. Well, that would be, again, in line with not just our Willow Park Natural Area, but throughout the community. And so as much as I do appreciate what's being brought forward in respect to Willow Park Natural Area itself, I do think that there's a much broader conversation that needs to occur, and we do need to look at this as a scope of our entire town. As we said, we have many parks, from the dog park to some of our parks with actual playgrounds and spaces, and then we have many just green spaces to which the town's responsible for maintaining that aren't necessarily parks, don't necessarily have trails and pathways. But we have a lot of programs that we are doing in respect to that, and I know it was a large conversation around the MPC bench as well about riparian zones. and the constant development around and close to watersheds and so on and so forth, and the way that the town does manage some of the care in and around, cutting too close, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, there's always conversations on weed control as to what's the right way to control the weeds. Is it by removing them physically? Is it by cutting them? Is it by spraying them? And so I think that those conversations need to happen from this council in respect to a service level throughout the town, not just for one specific area, even though this area can be identified as having some unique features and maybe a little bit of an amendment to our standard service level than others. So those are my comments on that.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? Councilor Bennett?
If no one else is going to, I'll just reflect on what Councillor Laurie has said. I believe in 2010, when this came before council, that it was a very specific and had a definition as to what that natural area was. I remember talking about orchids that are not found anywhere else in our community that were found there. There are certain types of species of plants that only grew there. It was a real definition of what a natural area should be. And to me, as our general manager of planning and infrastructure said, the natural area is basically a name that we use. We promote it in our town brochures. We have a Willow Park natural area. Well, what does that mean? What are we doing to protect it? What is our philosophy about that area? Those are the kinds of things that I would like us to explore further. And I believe that our community should be part of that conversation. And that's why I'm encouraging a public engagement strategy to work on this.
Okay, I see no more hands up. Councilor Mattis, thanks for bringing this up. I'll not be supporting the motion on the floor tonight because this requires a more governance view, an overall view of what's happening in our community and how we deal with environmental issues in our community. As you noted, and I think most of council is aware, we have 5 pillars that we drive our community through, and that's economics, governance, infrastructure, environment, and community development. We continue to do all 5 of them each and every year, but there's certain years that we focus on one pillar at a time because we can't do all 5 of them. We don't have the resources and we don't have the ability to do it all. The fact that we're also redoing our MDP, which you mentioned on page 209, does address and mention a lot of the things that you did bring up. So I believe in the updating of the MDP will address some of those issues, and especially that gives the opportunity for us to engage our residents when we redo our MDP like we did in 2012. We went and engaged the community. That'll be the opportunity for members that live in that area and that live elsewhere in town to provide input on what they think natural areas should be, what our park system is, what it should be, because it's bigger than just this one area. I think we need to set what our baseline is in terms of how we do things, and then if this area, as mentioned by Councilor Laurie, needs special attention, then we can do that. And currently, in 2010, I did vote in favor of changing this to make it the Willow Park Natural Area. There were 2 sides of the fence there, people that wanted it and people that didn't. I sided with going ahead because I thought it added something to our community, and it sure has. You know, I walk my dog in that area all the time, and I still run into people that like it, and I still run into people that don't like it. So I think we made everybody happy because both sides are still equally upset with me. So I do appreciate the conversation, and hopefully that will continue as we continue to move forward with our MDP and our future strategic planning sessions. Councilor Mattis, you can close up.
I just wanted to bring to the attention on page 213 of page 256. If we go to part 3 under definitions, it describes what a natural area is in this community. And it tells us that it's an area of land or water that is dominated by native vegetation and relatively undisturbed by human activity. These areas could include grasslands, forests, wetlands, peatlands, or riparian areas. Areas such as groomed parks, sports fields, and schoolyards are not natural areas. So this is in our municipal development plan. And when we look at what we're asking for, in terms of just are the things that were presented initially in 2010, which was basically going back into, just wanted to scroll. Just referring to the original document of April 20th, 2010, page 234 out of 256, where we talk about the Willow Park Natural Area Project is intended to enhance the land immediately east of Willow Park by defining it as a naturalized green space that will include native plants and trees, wildlife habitat, and recreation trails, as well as an existing municipal utility. Then we've talked about in here the 4 basic strategies for implementing this project and continuing on. So based on the information I've received and based on the information that I see in the municipal development plan, it is separating that area as a unique area in Stony Plain. And it does, to me, fit within the definition that was originally provided in the municipal development plan. So I would appreciate, I do not believe this would take a tremendous amount of work. I mean, we are maintaining it in a certain way. The questions are basically, have we planted any native plants in this area? What is our philosophy? If this is a unique place in our community, which is so extraordinarily important for our environment. We need to have an ecosystem that basically allows all types of diversification of plants, of wildlife, and of basic, your small microorganisms in a community. That is what is going to facilitate our overall ecosystem in our community. So I would really hope that you would support this request. It's not a big request, but it's just to get the basic information so that we can assess where we're at right now, and then maybe some of the suggestions that were provided here tonight would be of benefit by ensuring that other members of the community are involved.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Matties. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. 9.2, Councillor Matties, please.
That Town Council direct administration to provide an update regarding 3 of the town's 4 basic strategies. Whoops. Okay, what happened? All right, here we go. That Town Council direct administration to include the following monthly. Oh, this is my next motion. Are we doing this right now?
Yes, we changed it.
Oh, I didn't realize. Sorry. Okay. The Town Council direct administration to include the following reports monthly at the Governance and Priorities or regular council meeting for information. The first report is a report to council, department report with key items on table, in progress, or soon to be, and summary of town manager. Involvement, for example, town projects or initiatives, and key meeting dates. The second report is an administrative report, bylaw violations report, which would include Excel spreadsheet and a chart summary. And third, a permit report for monthly issued permits.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm getting there. Okay. The reason that I am requesting this is to give our council the opportunity to have information that would give us indicators of that all is well in the community. Right now, we get quarterly reports that provide an overview of initiatives and activities in the town. But by having, for example, a bylaw violations report, that's going to be able to allow us to see if there's any changes in the following of our bylaw and our bylaws, and overall whether or not that we need to act or proactively deal with the situation. Secondly, with regards to permit reports is about the development and the growth of our community. And by getting a monthly report, we're able to address and see what the growth and development is in our community without having to ask or wonder. Like, we have that information available to us. Finally, with regards to the report to council, with regards to a department report, I appreciate that on a quarterly basis we get this information and it's very well done, but by having this on a monthly basis, because things change and activities come and go on a monthly basis, I don't believe it would cause any additional work for administration to provide that type of report. And with regards to the summary of the town manager, it would give us a nice high-level overview of the activities that are happening. I gave some examples for all of us to review from the town of Gibbons, where they do use these things. And when I had asked one of the councillors, I said to him, how do you know that things are well in your community? And he said, well, you basically find that by looking at the administrative reports that are provided to you monthly with in your agenda package. And I said, well, what administrative reports are those? And he basically gave me this example. So I would like to share that with you, and I would really like to see this on a monthly basis.
Okay. Thank you. Members of council, I open the floor. Councillor Loy.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. And I'm glad that Councillor Matties gave this to us back, March the 11th, I believe it was, and said, basically 2 weeks to kind of mull this over. Personally, I believe that quarterly is adequate. I do not like to see administration be tasked with more tasks to bring things to us on a regular basis. They're already tasked beyond the nth degree, and to keep adding this onto them, I really don't think it's fair. I believe that it could be summed up when we do the town manager involvement. We start to slip into the micromanaging, that we're not just sitting back and trusting what the town manager and all the senior staff and all the staff under them are doing. And for me, I do trust them. Bylaw violations, we get that quarterly. There's trends in that, things happen. I don't really believe that it's going to help us out all that much. Pardon me, Your Worship. And the same thing with monthly issued permits. Councillor Matties, you sit on the Growth and Commerce Committee along with myself and with Councillor Palachko. Those stats can come in on a monthly basis, and we do have them. I don't think it's going to change anything. So based on the fact that I think we're just downloading more work on administration, I don't think it's necessary, and I don't want to see us micromanaging them any further. That's my comment, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too appreciate the lead time to mull this over. I'm inclined to welcome these reports. Back campaigning a number of years ago, it would reflect a desire by residents, I think, that these reports might fill, who want to know more closely what's going on. And in regards to Councillor Loy's concern that we may fall into micromanaging, I think being aware of that risk alleviates it right there. So, just a comment.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Councillor Lorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate this being brought forward, and I guess my biggest consideration as I started looking at this was as we talk about governance versus administration, and what our role is, and how these reports play into us and the decisions we make, and what it is that we are tasked to do given our positions as elected officials on council. And going to the level that is suggested in this motion, to me is the level that I would expect one of our GMs would see. I would expect one of our GMs would see a weekly or monthly report, for instance, on bylaw violations. I would expect that our manager of planning and infrastructure would see a weekly or monthly report on permits and statistics. And so as I go through this, I had to ask myself the question as to what governance, what benefit to governance would receiving these reports on a monthly basis occur if we receive these on a monthly basis. And I was hard pressed to find some. And some things that I found concerning are the comparative community was Gibbons, a community of 3,500 people, which is 5.5 times smaller than the town of Stony Plain. And so I started taking a look around at how other communities report. And majority of communities that I looked at that were of similar size to the town of Stony Plain report to their councils quarterly. If we drill down to some of the specifics of the motion, the reports to council for department reports and key initiatives, summary of town manager involvement, key meeting dates. I mean, we get a 30-plus page report quarterly that has some significant information in it on those items, particularly on our Q4, pages 25 and 26 address some of these specifically, particularly in respect to our capital projects and our corporate plan initiatives. So, I mean, when we talk about what's going on in our different departments, when we talk about our town manager's involvement, I think we see a lot, and we get an opportunity there as well to ask some questions. Again, I don't know, seeing that monthly, if that would change from seeing it quarterly. When we talk about bylaw violations, well, I took a look back and we have 3 pages, pages 13, pages 14, and pages 15, which outline our bylaw violations and then drill them down very specifically. For Q4, we had 715 files generated. So that's approximately 250 a month. And when I'm reading this and it's asking for an Excel spreadsheet and chart summary, I'm thinking again, 250 lines on an Excel spreadsheet. From a governance perspective, what benefit does that give me? How does that help shape my decision versus how we have it now? And if we look at page 13 of our quarterly report, we get a great breakdown that starts off with our Q4 file summary to traffic files, public behavior files, nuisance files, animal control files, community files, and assist files. And as the report goes on, it then even starts drilling down into that. So then we see a chart that breaks down, for instance, our community files and tells us how many training, memorandum of understanding, outside agency, joint force, foot patrol, et cetera, 2018 fourth quarter traffic files. It breaks out all our traffic files, public behavior files, assist files, nuisance files. So all the information is here. It's broken down very well. It's compiled very nicely. And again, I struggle to see what governance benefit this gives us to receive it monthly versus quarterly. Permit reports, again, in the quarterly report, we do see it on page 9. We see some of our permit statistical reporting, as was mentioned through the GCC. There's some reporting there, as well as there's a great quarterly report that MPC receives, and that comes to us in our council package through the MPC minutes as well, that the report is, I believe it's about 5 to 6 pages long, and gives us year-over-year comparison analysis all the way back, the last one from Q4, all the way back to 2013. Trends are defined as information compiled over time. And seeing this information once every 3 months, I feel gives us a good understanding and a good optic of trends. Seeing this information month to month, not only does it create a significant additional workload and task on administration, but I also think it puts us at risk of very reactionary decision making, which is not something that I think we want to go down on. I think we need to keep this as quarterly. I do think all the information that you're asking for is there. I would strongly encourage you, if there is a piece of information that you feel is missing from our current reporting, that we maybe look at some specifics. And an example would be, I believe the last time this report came forward on our facility usage, it told us how many hours our facility was used, but it didn't tell us the percentage of availability that was used. And so I made that request, and I hope on our future quarterly reports we see that. So I'd encourage you to look at these reports, and if there is something you feel specifically missing that would benefit us from a governance standpoint, that we request. But I feel that a change in format or a change in time frame and bringing separate reports forward is not just at this time. I think we get the information that we are required to make our decisions, and so I won't be able to support this motion this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I seem to have fallen into the category of historian on this council. I hate to admit that, but it's true. So again, I have to look back at when I was first elected in 2007 and the kinds of reports we were getting at that time. And even up until, I can't remember when our quarterly reports started coming in this format, but it was like night and day compared to the way that it used to be with our reports coming in basically quarterly, but not to the level of detail that they are now, not at the readability that they are now. Forgive me, Mr. Mayor, if I don't mean to be derogatory to Gibbons, but when we were that size, we were probably asking for the same thing. We have grown above anything that this motion has for our information. In addition to that, Mr. Mayor, we have also just signed on, most of us, to email notifications. And I believe our permit reports are coming out not just to us council, but to any resident that signs up for those notifications. Our social media accounts are quite full of this information that of what's happening in our town. Announcements, maybe not the how many? 900? 700. Yeah. Our residents don't even need to know that much. But we have so many other different ways of reporting this kind of information now that this motion, yeah, I won't be able to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Pechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to drag this on any longer than it's really gone on, other than I would like to make just a real quick point. The information that this town has got at our grasp for new councillors is phenomenal. Anything we need, we can get through the town, and the reports that are there for us is available at our fingertips. So I will not be supporting a motion. This is going backwards from what I can see to some place that is for a very small community. So that's.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions? Okay. Thank you for bringing it forward, Councillor Matties. I will not be supporting the motion at hand. We do have quarterly reports which are very in depth and it covers everything that you requested in the monthly statements. I think Councillor Laurie mentioned a few of them, but if you look at the fourth quarter that was presented to Town Council on February 25th, it breaks down the new businesses that you were mentioning. 2018, there was 139 new businesses, and it broke it down to 43 retail and service, 43 contractors, 40 home base, 12 hawklers and peddlers, and 1 no charge. So all the information is already there. It's already compiled for us. I don't think we need to have the staff do more work to do quarterly, monthly reports to members of council. Go ahead and you can summarize.
Thank you, Your Worship. So basically, when I was looking at, for example, the permit report talks about all development in the community, not just businesses. And so I would like to see on a monthly basis the overall growth of our community. And it just is, for me, that's a very easy thing. The report would already be there. So it's just adding it to an agenda as an administrative item. So to me, that shouldn't be any extra work at all. Just put it in the agenda. Same thing with regards to a bylaw violations report. I mean, it's already there. And whether it's in an Excel spreadsheet or in chart summary form, but I would kind of like to know month by month, has there been a significant change of anything? So I think that's important. With regards to the report to council, department report, boy, you know what? I mean, if this is any additional work than providing it quarterly, I would be quite surprised. I think it is a wonderful way to be able to just summarize what are the top things that are happening you know, in the community and keeping us abreast of things so that we can represent this community. So from my perspective, I would love to see these free reports. Having said that, I've heard my counselor, my fellow councillors, so I mean, that's basically my rationale for having these, so thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion is defeated. Moving on to 9.3, stormwater management master plan. And if we can get staff ready, administration. Good morning, sir. And again, there's a sign-up sheet. If you can sign in there, please. And good morning. Good evening. Yes.
You better not be here.
Maybe we're thinking it's going to be a long meeting.
We listen to you.
Your Worship, I'll just do a few opening remarks here. So we've got David Yu from Sam Eng here. Sam Eng is a new consulting company we've used. They were hired to complete a stormwater master plan for the town. So they've been working through the end of last year and in the beginning of this year and have a draft report in front of you today. This is a fairly significant piece of work for the town because it updated master plan that was outdated, and there has been significant work on our infrastructure and how we might handle some things going forward. So I guess I'll hand it over to Mr. Yu to give his presentation.
Morning, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council. It's my pleasure to present to you the findings of our work. I was the project manager. There are many team members that has worked with me to compile this report, as well as your staff from engineering and public works. So the presentation should last maybe 15 to 20 minutes or so. So the objective for me will be to provide you with an overview of the drainage infrastructure, both inside the community as well as surrounding you. Then to provide you with an assessment of the overall performance of your existing system according to the questions that we've been asked to answer. And then to look at the any recommendations to improve the current system, as well as looking out into the future and what that may look like in terms of ease of development, as well as the necessity for major infrastructure investment. So this map here is a little difficult to dissect the detail, but to explain, really the red line outlines where the drainage basin have been delineated through the town, as well as the upstream areas. The color in the background is an indication for highland versus lowland. So to the north east corner, so that's where the north arrow is, and so that's upper right-hand corner. That will be the exit point for all of our drainage. That is the low point, so that's actually immediately north of the town of Spruce Grove. And to the west, so that's the left-hand side, that will be where the origin of all the water is that needs to flow through our town. So the red line basically highlights where the drainage divides are. So somewhere in the middle, there is the Highway 16A. You can see that very dark line that runs through the northern portion of the map. And just a little bit to the south of that, would be the CN rail, which is at an angle. Now, in summary, the only reason I'm showing you this map is that the town of Stony Plain occupies an area about 3,700 hectares, which is more orientated towards the bluish colored area. And then the outside area are all of the lands that needs to drain through us. And that land in total is about 12,000 hectares. So there's a lot of land upstream, and that water does flow through the town area. Within the town itself, you have about 3,700 that is incorporated in the boundary. About 1,200 of those hectares have been developed, and about 2,500 is yet to be developed. So conceivably, within the current jurisdiction, your population, even if maintaining the current density, should easily be able to triple the current size. So here's more of a zoom-in picture of the town, as well as the drainage areas. So as you can see, we have the 4 main creeks. When we started the project, they were called Creek 1, 2, 3, 4. So we gave them names, and your administration helped to give these names. So starting from the west, we started to call that the Heritage Creek. And then the one running through downtown, that will be Whispering Waters Creek. And then the one that flows through the eastern part of town will be called Stony Creek. And then the far east one will be Adam Creek, which the Stony Creek flows into. So as you can see, majority of this land that's located inside the town don't really have any border high-density development. So really, the upstream lands are all located within Parkland County, which is your neighbor. To the east, though, you do have the town of Spruce Grove, and some of that land traverse back and forth, depending on how you look at it in terms of drainage, and I will discuss that in the future development plan. So what we did is to compile an inventory of all of your drainage assets. Your piping have been collected. Some were missing from older neighborhoods, so surveys were conducted. So as you can see, we have a fairly significant investment of storm infrastructure, and all of that infrastructure have been compiled into a computer program where we can calculate the capacity versus the drainage area that it provides. We also had a look at some of the other storm infrastructure. So this particular diagram shows you where all the storm ponds are. We counted roughly 30 storm ponds. And for the population of Stony Plain, that's quite a few. One comment that we would make is that it's been really, really well served that the town has a lot of storm ponds in new areas to buffer the flow. Moving into the future, the number of storm ponds and the fragmentation of ponds do give rise to some, not concern, but a thought to perhaps better planning can consolidate smaller ponds into bigger ones, and therefore reduce some long-term maintenance and upgrade needs. We also looked at all of the creeks and culverts that are through there. So the 4 creeks that I have mentioned, there's at least 30 locations where you have major culvert crossings. Those all have been surveyed, analyzed. By and large, I would say 90% of those locations are adequate in terms of the need for it to serve. There's a few isolated locations, but they have been identified, and you can budget for those in due course. So I'll just move on to the results of the assessment. So what we see is that about 30% of the town's storm network, when we have a 1 in 5 year storm, those pipes will be full. And in particular, the older neighborhoods, you'll see more pipes that are full for that type of event. And the reason we look at that is that modern design standard requires the developer to design their storm pipes so that they can handle all of the 1 in 5 year event. So in the older areas, that may be some deficiency. The saving grace is that we don't see much flooding occurring, even though the pipes are not taking all the flow. And the reason for that is that most of your street network are well graded, and the water do end up in those 4 creeks. And the runs of the road between those 4 creeks are not so long that you have a huge accumulation of water running down the roadway. Then we looked at the 100-year event, and in that it increases to 50% of pipes that would be overloaded. So the bar chart on those 2 diagrams just summarize all the different rating criterias, and that over time has become a standard in the engineering community. So you start looking at pipes when it starts to color yellow, and then orange and red are the ones that you need to, over the long term, address. In terms of the surface, I have mentioned majority of the area are fairly well graded. There are 7 locations that we would recommend that the town have a closer look. They are not weaknesses that are system-wide that cause a widespread problem, but during the 100-year event, the amount of surface water that are on the roadway is not acceptable if you were to design those roadways using today's standard or too deep. In terms of the solutions to them, we feel that it would be very localized. Some locations may be looking at regrading of certain roadways just slightly to allow the water to drain a different path, so to cut off the water that are going to trap-low areas. Others may require putting in ponds in grass areas, so to take the water off the road. So they're not huge systematic problems, they're localized problems. And we've identified 7 of them. So in summary, of the existing system, we think that the 4 creeks that are running through the town is a very key strength of the town's drainage infrastructure. The culverts that are through CN Rail as well as Highway 16A, when we looked at them, they're well-sized to serve the town for the foreseeable future, given that new development is required to control their flow rate to a certain number. And by and large, that's 2.5 liters per second per hectare. I mentioned about the 7 locations. Newer developments, we think are, the model of your new development is quite well done with the ponds and streets and the pipes all draining towards it. And we did do an evaluation of the town in terms of climate change. Now, first of all, you said, what is climate change? Some think it's drought, some think it's flood. So in our case, we looked at it as a flood. So we subjected the town to even a more significant event, 1 in 200-year event, and the location and the magnitude of the problem areas did not substantially change. So some of the weaknesses we've noticed, the older areas are lacking both in terms of storm pipe coverage as well as catch basin capacity. So when you're going through revitalization of those neighborhoods, you should look at that as one of your components to implement. Better catch basin capacity and storm pipe also has the way of extending the life of your roadway because less water has to drain down and also sit on the road. The many stormwater management facilities are good for now, and like I mentioned before, with better planning, I could see ways you could try and consolidate that into fewer numbers but bigger ones. Also, this inventory of your storm, we saw that as a first complete inventory of the storm system, and we would encourage the town to look at it as a start of an asset inventory, and using asset management principles, you could implement a process to say, okay, here are the strengths and here are the weaknesses, so here's our total reinvestment picture moving into the future. So in terms of looking at a plan for the future, we delineated all of the areas. There you have at least 20 or so documents that we've reviewed. Some of them were produced by developers, or a lot of them were produced by developers. And we've managed to chart a course pretty much for each quarter section moving into the future. It was not a difficult exercise for us to do because the four creeks provide a suitable outlet for future development. So they're very close, all the lands, to these outlets. One thing we looked at fairly carefully as under direction by your administration is the border you share with the city of Spruce Grove. And some lands right now are drawn to drain across, I believe that's called Veteran Way. And when we looked at it, our opinion of it is that, yes, right now there may be a tendency for that water to flow to the east side of Veteran Way, and some flows east and then come back. We feel that from a management viewpoint, the elevation difference really isn't there. So everything that would be inside the corporate boundary of town of Stony Plain can be directed to drain towards Adam Creek. And that's how we've drew up the plan for those areas development. So in conclusion, we find that the town's system do offer a good level of service, and during the 100-year event, except for the 7 areas, you have a 100-year level of service. The 4 major crossings, there are 5 major locations where it crosses CN and highway. Those are the main points of consideration, and they are adequate for the foreseeable future when controlled to 2.5 liters per second per hectare. The older neighborhoods need more retrofit consideration for storm, and then we recommend that you consider the asset management approach to stormwater. The one other observation and recommendation we would like town council to consider is that with the increasing awareness of environmental stewardship as well as environmental regulation, one thing that we do not see the town have is an inventory of what we call your environmentally sensitive area. Majority of other municipalities of your size would have done one or in the process of acquiring one. So that layer of information can be very useful in that you overlay environmentally important or sensitive areas with your stormwater plan, and the goal is to integrate the 2 plans together so that you are preserving nature while at the same time making use of nature for your stormwater management. In that way, you can optimize or balance the land for development versus the preservation of nature. And if you leave it to the developer to deal with, it's a more difficult task for them, as well as because they'll be dealing with it as a necessary evil. And whereas you could be one step ahead and plan ahead and provide that function for them. And they still have to work out their individual details, but you're able to create the linear connectivity much more easily as a municipality than it would be for a landowner. So that really wraps up the core recommendations and the summary of the stormwater. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Yu, and I appreciate hearing the fact that the town is capable of handling a lot of the stormwater, and that in the 100-year flood, Stony Plain will not get flooded and be underwater 100%, except for those 7 areas. So thank you. Members of council, any questions of clarity on the presentation? Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. I found your report very informative. Just a quick question. If you could make comment in regards to how our spring runoff would compare to a, you know, would it be like a 1 in a 5-year flood event, or and if that's relevant to your report, or?
Go ahead.
Yes, I can do that. Yeah, so it's really a debate that, yeah. So if we look at spring snowmelt as a more of a long duration event, right? Because the freeze and thaw cycle and the melting and the freezing. So for rural basins, that is a very critical criteria because the melt is slow and it lasts for a very long time. Because of the winter ice accumulation, it restricts the capacity of many infrastructure. So for example, culverts are sustainable to be frozen during the snowmelt event. When we look at snowmelt for urbanized development, is typically not the most critical event because our pipes are not frozen by and large in an urbanized environment. So as the snow melts, the 5-year event is much greater than a snow melt on a roadway. Now, in your case, you do have culverts that are along those creeks. I'm not familiar with your operations, whether they keep on top of it to make sure that they're not completely frozen. But as we see it, there should be no problem in terms of capacity if it was just handling the snow melt itself.
That's good. Yes, and our staff do go out there with a hot sea and thaw out all the storm drains and catch basins when necessary. Okay. Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was a huge amount of information, and your presentation just now was very informative. Could you just clarify or reiterate again the part you were just saying about the environmental inventory and how we should do something to help something to, if you could just repeat that for me and help me to visualize what we could do to protect some of those environmental areas.
Okay. Right. So the inventory of environmentally significant or important areas or sensitive areas, whatever the terminology is, the goal is to identify high value areas, and that may also have that might also connect with each other, and quite often they do. When you look at a series of wetlands, they generally have a flow pattern to them, and the idea is to identify those important areas so that when you are looking at development, you preserve those linear connections as well as the wetlands themselves so that they're not filled in, obstructed, which we used to do. So the regulation has it now that if you are developing land and you find wetland or environmental areas on your property and you decide to build houses on them and in place of those you build a storm pond, you're required to first get an approval from Alberta Environment to allow you to fill in the wetland, which is not impossible, but you do have to compensate either financially or through some other means for those wetlands. So that approval process is typically at least a year to do, maybe longer, depending on your proposed plan. Now, if a municipality was to go ahead and do an inventory and have a plan that integrates the stormwater management with those natural features, you conceivably can achieve it by utilizing the natural storage that's available in the wetland. Now, there are things you have to design around, for example, the stormwater quality consideration. In an urbanized development, runoff is a little quicker into those wetlands than by nature, but you can deal with those characteristics and create a plan where certain areas will be protected from development, but development itself know exactly what they need to do to discharge to those areas.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, one more question. I noticed in your report, you were in meetings with Spruce Grove. We have an area east of town, east of Veterans Boulevard, that has been, it has an area structure plan on our side to build a residential neighborhood there, and Spruce Grove also has one, but that area is very much a wetlands. And so when I was sitting on MPC, we really were working with the developers there to work with the city of Spruce Grove to see what could happen there. And in your report, I believe there were some updates as to those two areas. The one on our side is called Edgeland, and I'm not sure what the one on their side is called. But it was right at the beginning when it was, you were talking about the meeting minutes, and there was a representative there from Spruce Grove. And so is there a way to negate the damage that can be done to those wetlands with those two subdivisions adjacent to each other?
That would be our belief, is that if a wetland inventory was done in that area, you would be able to identify those areas as wetland, and that wetlands exist because water are flowing through it. So certainly we want to encourage water to flow through them in a way that doesn't destroy the wetland. So those are the two things that development would need to manage. One is water quality, another would be the fluctuation of the flow rate, and those can be done. And while have the majority of the buffering being offered by the wetland. So that would be a good case in point.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Lowry?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Yu, for the presentation. And this question might be for you, or administration may be able to answer this a little bit more. One thing unique to our community is the dewatering system that we have in our community. And I didn't see much in the way of reference to that throughout this report and the impacts of that dewatering system and the volume that would come out of there during one of these 1 in 5 or 1 in 100 year events. Because that's not necessarily an upstream flow, that's a flow that's created within the town. So are those flow rates in addition to what you're projecting through the hydraulic calculations, or are those flow rates from the dewatering system included in the flow rates through your hydraulic system?
No, we did not have the dewatering flow rates as part of our assessment. Typically, though, groundwater, when we look at a 5 or 100 year flow event, groundwater would not be a significant component. Now, having said that, I don't know your dewatering flow rates there.
So, Your Worship, I do draw attention to that because we know that we hold a significant number of the dewatering licenses, of the very few that are in existence, and we do know that there is a significant volume of water that is distributed from that dewatering system. And I do have concern that this report has come forward without the inclusion of that volume of water in these calculations and these projections.
Okay. Yeah, good comment. Maybe we can sit down with staff again to see what how much water we put in, and that goes into Whispering Waters Creek. Is I think you said there's capacity to hold it, but maybe let's make sure that there is that capacity. Any other questions? I have a question. Oh. Go ahead, Councilor Bennett.
Yeah. This one is directed to our administration. I wasn't sure if we were directing questions to them yet. And that
This is just asked for Mr. Yu for clarification on his presentation.
So I'll wait.
Okay. Oh, I do have a question regarding on page 30, sir, of 256. And in your report, it talks about the number of pipes within the town of Stony Plain. Let me just find that in a second. So page 32, we have 63 kilometers of storm pipes, et cetera. Okay, out of those pipes, 32% of the pipes are made with PVC. 22% is made out of concrete. 26% of the pipes are unknown. If I add up those three percentages, it's only 80%. So what are the other 20% of pipes made out of?
I think the combination would be corrugated steel. It could be vitrified clay tile. So there are quite a few different type of pipe material there.
Okay, and so my question is, why wasn't that 20% mentioned here? Because we mentioned the other types of PVC, concrete, and unknown material.
Yeah, there's a bar chart with that graph, and that bar chart and a pie chart. So it's on the chart of the figure. So we just thought to mention the major pipe material, which is PVC, which is newer, and then prior to PVC, majority was concrete. And some of your older areas, we have no record of what those pipes are. Yeah, but the whatever pipe that we've inventoried, we have identified a pipe material if we were able to find it.
Okay, and that's the 26% that's unknown is the older materials within town Stony Plain?
There's no record of, majority of them are older. There's no record of what they are. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions regarding the presentation report? No? Councilor Matthews?
Your Worship, along the lines of what you just asked, 2 points above that, it refers to the diameter of the pipes, and it only describes 60% of the pipes, and that was the question I had. If you could help me understand where the other 40%, what size they would be?
It will be all smaller than that.
Real small.
Yeah.
Okay.
So many, the storm network is quite intricate, and so piping in the middle of the roadway that carries a lot of flow, that's the majority of the inventory. And when subdivisions are built, that's where most of the records are. Assets such as catch basins and the pipe that will connect the catch basin to that main pipe, quite often it's not recorded, and it's very hard to find information for that unless the town puts in a requirement in your municipal standard to have that from developers' drawing submissions.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? No. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Have a good night.
Thank you. Administration, any more comments?
Your Worship, I guess just to summarize, this report is an important first step for the town, or I guess building on what we had previously to make it better. So our asset management program, as you can see, has some gaps and some information that we need to work on filling those gaps in, and not only in this infrastructure, but all the other infrastructure groupings that we have. There is some information here on the future of some of our capital programming that might come forward at the budget time and the corporate plan. So our job now is to take this information and build on it and program some of these improvements as they would be prioritized based on funding needs and other matters. And also of interest is the stormwater utility project, which is underway in the town. That this is an important information part of that project, in that, maintaining these systems, having the capital to replace them as necessary, it would be important to run a utility that was self-sufficient and sustainable. So again, this information will all come together in future plans, and we look forward to working with council on the strategy involved in that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Laurie, from the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Town Council accept the Stormwater Management Master Plan for information.
Okay. Members of council, comments to administration and questions. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, our general manager just answered my question, and that is in our corporate plans. How are we going to deal with this? So I have a better idea of that. I also just wondered about the historical flood data. I'm surprised that we don't have, it said in the report that we don't really have that flood data. And so I'm just wondering, is administration going to go down that path to try and gather that information? And how will you do that?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bennett, I believe most historical flood data is acquired through aerial photographs of the time of the worst type of flooding, and to see the extent of what happened. There is the ways of also measuring flow at various locations, so we would look at measuring flow and getting data during storm events, that type of thing. So there are some things we can do. I guess it's a matter of the resources and the timing and the funds to try to carry out some of these investigative things to make our system more robust and better. And we would look at that in the future as we build the program and make it stronger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Loy.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I just want to go back to my previous comment. I was trying to find which one of the, is this not again where we say to be placed on file? Is that not going to be on all our types of items?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Loy, that was a change for the acceptance of the council committee minutes. And so why we changed that was because we were doing a number of minutes at one time. And so just that change was around the minutes acceptance and not the reports as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just needed it for clarity. I wasn't sure. Okay. Thank you, Admin.
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to put the question through to administration in respect with our dewatering system and its impact on this report that we've been provided with today. I don't have the exact numbers as to how much we actually have diverted in the past, but what I do have in front of me is what our authorization for diversion is. For 2016, we were authorized to divert a little over 2 million cubic meters of water through our dewatering system. Again, I'm not sure what the numbers that we're actually diverting are and what the historical numbers are on that, but to me it does seem like that could have a significant impact on the data that's come out of the study, particularly in the hydraulic calculations, and in some of the areas that are identified there, definitely fed by the same creek that the dewatering system expels into. So I'm wondering if administration has a plan as to how they will address the contribution of the dewatering system into this plan, and if they will provide an update to council at a future meeting in respect to that.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Laurie. So what I would propose to do is we'll get Sam Mensch to do a technical memo and analyzing the impact of the groundwater on the overall 1 in a 100-year storm event, and then we can get a magnitude of impact based on that number, and then analyze whatever implications may come from that. I guess the good news is the groundwater would be a fairly consistent flow, not a peak kind of a flow. So the question is, how much capacity does it use? So we'll get some information from the consultant and analyze that data and bring it forward.
Thank you. Okay, I see no more hands up. I have a question then. With the storm management master plan that we've seen in the whole flow of water from the southwest side of Stony Plain to the northeast side, the reason we have storm management ponds and the prescribed flow rates of 2 liters per second per hectare, 2.5, that's because we wanted to prevent flooding downstream. What about preventing flooding from upstream? As Parkland County and the farming industry changes, lands get changed and stuff. Well, if you believe in the way that water flows, that does have an impact on us, so that water could be coming to our municipality at a faster rate than what normally has been in the past. How do we ensure that Parkland County takes appropriate measures to make sure that we're not flooded based on their developments and their changes in agricultural businesses in Parkland County?
Your Worship, to answer that question, so all municipalities are required to do statutory planning as part of their development process. So when they do their statutory planning, flood control and the matter of what type of storm system they're implementing to control the discharge, et cetera, within their boundaries and outside their boundaries, all of that becomes publicly shared and publicly known through the statutory planning process. So I guess to answer the question, we would continue to monitor things that would impact our community and then work to address them with our neighbors as appropriate.
Okay. So does Parkland County come to Stony Plain and ask us or inform us of developments that are happening that affect our water, the water courses?
Through your Worship, I think it depends on the nature of the development, I guess, and the size and extent of the development. But in general, yes, neighbors do coordinate with each other, and if it was significant enough, it has to go to the MRB for approval. So then it becomes even more widely, I guess, understood or publicized. So I'm not sure if the town manager has anything he wants to add on that, or.
Your Worship, maybe just for the benefit of all of council too. I think in the past, Parkland County has alerted town staff on certain developments near our border. But I would be to be open and straight with council. I know that we're not contact on each and every one that potentially has an impact on stormwater, and stormwater flows through the town of Stony Plain from that sort of southwest side. So again, short answer, some of the stuff that's very close, within a mile or a mile and a half, we'll typically be notified at a staff level, and outside that sort of perimeter, it becomes a little less likely that we will be specifically notified or asked for comment.
Okay, and thank you for that comment, because I do appreciate that. We have a development that is directly southwest of our community, and that's the Meadows of Rosenthal. It is primarily a farmland, or has been farmland for many, many years. Now there's a development there. That's the first phase on that quarter section. The next phase is 1 quarter section closer to us on Range Road 12. And currently in the first phase, there's no storm management pond to hold the water that now, as developed into acreages, does not hold the same amount of water as the farmland before. Councilor Brechko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question is regarding timelines. When I look at this report, there's some very in-depth stuff in here that is stuff that needs to be done over a period of time, and there's some stuff that can be done very soon. And I'll just a couple examples is, one is a simple lot grading program. I always thought we had a bit of one, but it is very clear today that in 6.7 we have 0 lot grading. It's basically a design that says you'll have grading to allow water to run off your property. So there's no specifics to it. And then I look at page 31 through 32, which is a much more in-depth 1 through 7, some heavy areas that could possibly flood out. And we know that in the past that has happened within our community. I'm just wondering for timelines as to what you're thinking. We would see something back at council to be able to look at some of this.
Worship, through you to Councillor Palechko. So I would suspect that this will be difficult to program in for even for the 2020 budget cycle, but certainly we would start to, I think one of the key points that Mr. Yu made was there are localized issues that we need to deal with, and in a strategic manner. And one of the examples he used was you could spend some money to create a better situation, but if you went too far, you might not get the best bang for your buck. So there's some conceptual work that needs to be done in order to choose the right solution depending on the problem. So what we would propose to do is to obviously take the most critical area and try to program that in and get some work done on the analysis, so we have a better cost estimate. So we would do that in 2020, and the work would be done in 2021. This is the kind of program rolling ahead program we would set up. And then in relation to some of the other issues, again, we would start to create programs that move the town forward at the right speed based on the urgency of this program, because there are other infrastructure deficits that would need to be addressed as well. So we would have to look at some judgment as to the risk of here versus the risk on some of the road issues we would experience, and et cetera. So a comprehensive program would be desired where we look at all the asset mixed together and come up with the right amount of money to spend on them all and move them all forward at the right speed. So I hope I answered your question.
Not quite. I think what I'm looking for is some specific timelines. I get a 2020, looking at it as an overall picture. Well, this is something that's sitting in front of us here today. And I guess what I'm concerned with is a fair bit of money has been spent on a report like this to take what period of time to address some of the issues. We're looking at a new subdivision within our community now. I think it's something that's quite important to us that this report has come to us. There needs to be a timeline attached to some of this aspect of it. And, I realize you need a bit of a time to do that as well, but, is that 6 months or is that 10 years? And I guess that's a concern that I've had in the past is there's reports that come, but then they kind of get shelved on the shelf, and then they get shelved a little bit more. So what I'm looking for is some timelines that you think is realistic to doing it. And I can appreciate a 2020 timeline. I'm not sure I can appreciate a 2025 timeline on something that is going to affect our community the way it is, right?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Palechko, I guess what we would have tried to do is give you enough information, give council enough information so that you would understand our recommendation based on this asset versus other assets, and the risk here may be lower than another one. It may be more urgent. So until we build the program to cover all our risks, and 2025 might be appropriate. I can't tell you today it is, but based on the silo of information we have today, we would like to go off and start addressing some of these things. But again, there are many road infrastructure deficits. There's a sanitary infrastructure deficit. There are other deficits in the town here that we need to address. So we would attempt to come up with a recommendation which is the best interest of the town, looking at the whole picture.
Your Worship, maybe just a couple other comments. So again, any of these master plans we do, whether it's stormwater, utility, I know we've done some transportation master plans in the past, they will typically have a fairly long time frame when they'll look out over whether it's 5, 10, 15 sort of years out. And some of it is driven by development. Obviously, some is driven by budget and so on and so forth as to how they're implemented when and the timing of such. And council will be hearing a bit further about this I believe in the next couple of weeks, if not next 4 weeks, about, I think it was mentioned somewhere in this conversation, a stormwater utility. And I'll tie it back to some stuff in the report as well. We have, I think it was indicated, we have sort of a higher than average storm ponds for a community our size. I think there's a comment along those lines. The ditches, I mean, all of this infrastructure. And to date, any of our capital or operating costs are sort of funneled through our utility, like our existing water and sewer utility. And that has been good for a long time. As it noted, it was, I mean, it's a reasonably solid system and so on. But moving into the future, as was mentioned, I mean, the maintenance of all of these storm ponds after the developers build them do turn over to the town, the ditches and so on. And what we'll be bringing to council to consider is essentially setting up a stormwater utility, which will allow for the funding to be put in place over time so that, in 10 years or 12 years when the next plan like this is being reviewed, there shouldn't be as much catch-up work that has to be completed, and that we're able to fund these sorts of operations and capital on an ongoing basis as we do with water and sewer. Which is really fundamentally the proper way to be running this sort of a utility service at this point in time, and moving into the generation future ahead. The operating budgets do include portions or certain amounts for stormwater work or effort. It's typically not very much. It's enough to clear out some ditches or maybe regrade and regrade some roadway sort of things. But so, Your Worship, sorry, I'll just leave it at that. That's we got some money in the operating budget that we do some of this work. Most of it is larger capital coming down the road, and I believe the intent is to take this plan to start putting it into corporate plans and budgets. So,
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And Councillor Fletcher mentioned lot grading, and I believe lot grading is covered on an MDP. So when we do our update, can staff provide what our current lot grading percentage is right now? I know you need a lot grading approval, but what is the approved slope? Like if it's 50%, 25%, 15%, 5% slope? Does anybody know?
I'm not sure what the question is. Can you repeat the question?
What is the current slope of our lot grading when we issue a lot grading certificate?
Your Worship, what is the current slope? So each property would be different. You'd have to have a minimum slope depending on the surface, grass or asphalt or concrete or whatever it is. So basically you have to make sure your property doesn't negatively impact your neighbors, and that there is a grading plan to go front to back or split or whatever the case may be, and we have to have swales or easements in place to handle the water that's supposed to traverse across properties.
Okay, and then that's a good comment, but based on this report, it says maybe we look at lot grading where we have less of a slope, so it has more time to absorb to the ground instead of washing off onto the road and into the catch basins and etc. For example, when I built my house, we did our house to a 3% grade. Like, I don't know, so is there a standard, is what I'm asking.
Yes, there is. Minimum 2% grade on grass.
Councilor Fletcher.
So I'll read off of what the report says here. Town of Stony Plain, 2006, Municipal Development Standards, Section 6. It says, only mention that the lot shall be graded to drain to the municipal storm system. Mention that buildings shall be above the major system hydraulic grade line for 100-year event, plus a minimum of 0.3 meters freeboard. So that tells me that each one of the individuals within our community can do their lot grade to pretty much the standard they want, as long as it slopes toward the 100-year event, which gives me a bit of a concern when we're building new development and we're talking about infrastructures within our community to carry water away properly. So I think it's very easy to say that one little thing in here could make a difference in our community going forward that does not cost a lot of money to do. So I think that's what I was looking for in the report that I was trying to get, and Tom did make point of some of the stuff coming back to, which I'm quite grateful for.
Thank you. And hopefully, as the new subdivisions come forward, like I think we're dealing with Tussock's, this report be supplied to the developers to have a view and to see how that they can make their subdivision accommodate this. Okay, any more questions? Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. To administration through you. On page 87, under 4.5.6, major drainage channels. The second point regarding a north flowing channel east of town at the boundary between the town of Stony Plain and the city of Spruce Grove. Management flow into the watercourse should be well planned to avoid infrastructure conflicts between municipalities. Is that the same issue that Councillor Bennett brought up? I think you also find it noted in the discussion notes on page 185. The Edgeland development and the city of Spruce Grove's objection to and possibly draining or blocking a drainage. Are those the two same things? And if so, I was wondering if administration could give me a sort of a breakdown to how they see that issue playing out between our communities.
Your Worship, I believe they are the same item. So again, how we would work on that, we would work with the developer. I mean, ideally, our infrastructure would handle our impact to the environment, and including stormwater. So Mr. Yu pointed out that was possible. So we would continue to work on plans to make that ensure that is feasible, and where as appropriate to come up with solutions to those problems.
Okay. And just to follow up, sorry, just in regards to, and I'm sure this is probably too early for the question, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. In regards to the possibility of a stormwater utility, would that be like the rest of our water utilities, being a tri-region type of thing where we'd have other members sitting from other communities?
Your Worship, what's intended now will just be a utility billing levy system that would be done by the town of Stony Plain in and of itself. I know Spruce Grove is looking at a similar utility system, but at this time they would remain separate.
Thank you. I see no more questions. So going forward, as this is a plan that just came up, there's recommendations of 7 areas in the town that would require maybe addressing if we had the 100-year flood. And based on the report, it has also been identified that all 7 locations could be, well, each location could be designed and have conceptual drawings of how we can address that for about $25,000 for each one of those areas. So based on my calculation, that's about $175,000 for that. As council is aware, a lot of this stuff will come back during strategic planning, or to see if we want to put those dollars in there. But I would just urge members of council that having this in our corporate plan will allow us to plan and design those areas, and then when the dollars are available, we can actually go forward and start them instead of just leaving them and then trying to catch up later on when we actually have the dollars. And the good thing is that we should be getting double what we get from our gas tax, so we can apply some money towards this infrastructure deficit that we have. Okay, with that, there's no hands, so thank you, Councillor Laurie, for the motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. And before we move on to 9.4, we're going to take about a 10-minute recess. Or is that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that town council adopt the 2019-2022 council strategic plan as presented.
Okay, go ahead and present, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. And members of council, provided for your review and consideration is the draft 2019 to 2022 strategic plan. The strategic plan framework derives from our municipal development plan's guiding themes of governance and partnerships, economic opportunity, supportive infrastructure, community development, and environmental responsibility. Council reviews and updates the strategic plan annually in January, and it is presented for your approval tonight. Once approved, the strategic plan guides the development of administration's priority projects and operations, which will be presented to council in the form of the corporate plan in November. In addition, this coming May, council will be engaging in a review of our vision and key themes as part of our municipal development plan, which will be outlined in an agenda item further in tonight's council meeting. So I'll just walk through our strategic plan summary for you, and wrong button. There we go. So just starting with our key themes, as I'd already mentioned, highlighted in the report, and how they fit within our MDP and our corporate planning process. The first is our governance and partnerships, and within this area we've defined 3 areas of commitment that council wishes to see focused in particular. The first around partnerships and advocacy with regional municipalities. We've defined elevating our relationships regarding Highway 779 and 628 to address development authority of that roadway, those roadways, ensuring Stony Plain's interests are represented on regional boards, committees, and plans, and implementing our advocacy strategy that was adopted by council in 2018, and continuing to foster unique partnerships required to advance the redevelopment of Old Town South. The second area of commitment is under cultivating strong organizational structure, and the 2 areas of key actions that will be focused on in that area is continued reinforcement of a robust organizational structure, and in addition to that, preparing a key performance measurements framework that will align with our strategic priorities. The third area under governance and partnerships will be continuing to engage with residents and stakeholders to integrate our decision-making and collaborative leadership. And the specific action area is creating opportunities for open dialogue with our residents through public participation and community events, as well as other direct means of communication with our stakeholders. The second area of theme and focus is economic opportunity. And again, we've defined 3 specific areas of commitment for focus in the economic area. The first is strengthening our vibrant business community, so focusing on business retention and expansion. And this is primarily done through actions of engagement with our existing local business community, investors, developers, and key stakeholders to identify opportunities for advancement of prosperity. The second area is enhancing and creating a more prominent tourism destination marketing for our community and through regional partnerships. The third is creating profile and monitoring the growth of our key business sectors. And the final area is making recommendations and identifying recommendations to improve our regulatory processes, fees, and opportunities to maintain a more competitive and attractive climate for investment. The second area of commitment is, of course, supporting and enhancing our downtown area. And this very specifically speaks to the actions related to our downtown redevelopment that we're currently in the midst of our redevelopment of our downtown area, and also within that specifically relocating our library into the downtown core with a partnership investment that is currently under construction for that facility. The third area of priority and commitment is around increasing awareness of our economic advantages and alignment with business attraction efforts, regionally specifically, and the area of action that we're most focused on right now, or have been focused on, is supporting and contributing to the development of Edmonton Global as a regional business attraction entity that we partnered as a founding stakeholder in 2017. We've continued to see the development of that entity as our primary regional business attraction and investment attraction body, and we'll continue to work with them to advance our efforts in attracting investment, and as well as implementing and monitoring our own economic development strategic plan. In the area of supportive investment infrastructure, we are seeking to commit to the following areas: implementing complete street design and planning for all modes of transportation. And specifically, we want to renew and implement a trails master plan. We also seek to continue our efforts to upgrade and enhance our community signage that we started in 2017 and continue to proceed through in a phased manner. Seeking to enhance access to Westview Health Centre and the surrounding neighbourhoods with the extension of South Park Drive, and a complete a renewal of our transportation master plan is also our key actions in that area. Secondly, we want to enhance facilities and amenities to meet our stakeholder and residents' needs. Primarily and most significantly is the development and construction of a regional recreation facility in Stony Plain as part of the recommendations of the 2017 Indoor Recreation Study. Recommending options to optimize our existing downtown community centre and maintaining its use and accessibility. Providing public transit through our regional transportation plan implementation and working with our regional partners on Regional Transit Commission as well. Examining the feasibility of a cultural centre in Stony Plain, and that work is currently underway. And creating an infrastructure and land assembly plan related to the town square concept, which was presented to council a number of years ago as part of our downtown redevelopment. The third area of focus and commitment under supportive infrastructure is successfully managing the impacts of our growth. And our key actions that we've identified in this area include the design and construction of a municipal cemetery, the development of a land management policy to provide council in particular with a framework for land transaction decision making, and the renewal and review of our off-site levy bylaw as part of the consideration for the new authorities granted under the MGA. Under the community development theme, we have committed to, I think it's 3 aspects. I'll speak to the first 2. The development of cultural aspects of the community, and our key actions in this area include increased awareness and participation in our local arts and cultural opportunities, a renewal and implementation of the cultural master plan, and the creation of a public art strategy to guide the placement of public art within our community. Secondly, we wish to enhance the safety and protection of our community. The actions that we will continue to take in this area include annual emergency planning updates and reports to the community to enhance our organization and community disaster resiliency. Working with our very important partner at CN Rail to ensure existing rail line safety for all of our residents and businesses, and looking to advocate and work with them on enhancements specifically to the rail line safety area around a second pedestrian crossing and vehicular overpass. And finally, a renewed partnership arrangement for improvements to provide enhanced pedestrian safety corridors, and most specifically focusing on areas related to our schools. The third under community development is, of course, pursuing partnerships and institutions to unite and expand opportunities for our community. So very broadly, but most specifically speaking to strengthening our collaboration with family and community support services to deliver and create awareness of effective and reliable programs within our community, the adoption of a renewal for our housing strategy, to reflect options for our current environment and community needs. Collaboration regionally with our school boards to determine future school locations and enhancements of community uses at the school sites. And finally, the implementation of recommendations for the Mayor's Task Force on Community and Citizenship Development. The final theme of commitment that we've identified within the strategic plan is, of course, our environmental responsibility. And under this area, we've identified a number of actions that fall within the commitment to protect and manage our environmental impact. First, we want to seek to align current development and building standards within the town's environmental initiatives. Look for initiatives and programs that can reduce our environmental impact and benefit to residents. Pursue opportunities for regional waste and recycling facilities and programs. Review and plan for sustainable use of our town's dewatering system, and progress our environmental initiatives through education, programming, and promotion. Some of these items we spoke to in our meeting this evening as well on other items. So at this point in time, that's primarily a summation of where we're at with our strategic plan, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions from council. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and this plan does encompass the majority of the talk that we talked about and the kind of the direction that the town of Stony Plain is going. Members of the council, any questions and comments regarding the presentation and the plan? Councillor Bennett?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm referring to page 198 under the first bullet, where it has to do with a complete and renewed transportation master plan, including the role of Range Road 12 in the road network. I'm just wondering if, I remember when we were doing our preliminary Old Town South public engagement, and Range Road 12 factored in quite a bit with our residents who were at those meetings, especially when it came to building the overpass and maybe some work that needs to be done on Range Road 12, such as straightening it out. And so I'm wondering if that's included in this bullet here, is some of those recommendations, some of those discussions during that public engagement.
Your Worship, can maybe just provide some comment on that one. So what this bullet is essentially indicating is that over the life of this plan, we would be pursuing I guess it says renewed, but we would be doing a new transportation master plan. The specific mention of Range Road 12 is to, I guess, identify, I know I was here the last time we did a transportation master plan, and at that point in time, frankly, Range Road 12 wouldn't have been considered as high a priority area as it is today, and likely, over the course of the next transportation master plan, so over the course of the next 10 to 12 years kind of thing. So I don't know if I would say that it would specifically reflect those comments at this point in time, because what this bullet is saying is that we will, there's one of the key actions, I guess, is the wording, is that that plan will be undertaken during the course of this strategic plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, council remembers the fact that we are starting to do the cemetery out in Range Road 12, which will then have impact on the road as well. We've also initiated contact with CN about maybe possibility of an overpass on Range Road 12, because that's the only range road or intersection within the town of Stony Plain that doesn't require a lot of work of buying up houses and businesses to knock them all down to provide an overpass or underpass. And that the fact that Range Road 12 at that area is naturally dipped in, so it makes logical sense to work with the CN to see if we can get some kind of overpass over that. So hopefully that happens. When is the timeline for the renewed transportation master plan?
Your Worship, we would desire to do that next year.
2020. Okay. Councillor Matthews?
Your Worship, through to administration, if you could refer to page 196 of 256. Under governance and partners, the first or the top section of cultivate a strong organizational structure and the processes that deliver effective and efficient services. Just wondering if the word systems should not be in here. When we look at our world today with technology and systems, both structure and systems organize work. And I think to not have that in there would be amiss in terms of reflecting the sign of the times and the significance of technology and systems in our overall government. So I would suggest, for example, cultivate a strong organizational structure and systems and processes that deliver effective and efficient services. And then in the second, under key actions, again, we talk about the efficient use of human capital and financial resources, but truly the efficient use of technology is something that should be included in here to some degree. I would suggest. So if you could comment on that, I guess, as to what your thoughts are.
I can, because this is under governance and partners, and that's where you're taking a system as a partner or a governance model.
Well, the process is not a partner, and neither is a structure. We're talking about how we would organize work in a community.
Okay, so
Your Worship.
comment on the word system?
Yeah, again, I think it's frankly, maybe a matter of just the language used or what have you. Again, deliver effective and efficient services or systems and processes that deliver effective and efficient services. I think the idea generally with that statement and the key action, is just simply that the organization stays strong in one way, shape, or form. And I think, in the bullet there where it says, human capital, financial resources, it's almost like you could include those and other terms or none at all. Like, really what we're talking about there is just, that we're going to ensure the organization can support what council wants to achieve over time. So, to take a look and insert the word systems in some of those areas, we can certainly do that prior to final draft. But I think the idea anyways is that that whole area just is noting and committing to a strong organization, both from the council level and from administrative levels. So.
Any other questions, comments regarding that? Okay. Seeing none, what happens after this?
Your Worship, we'll publicize the strategic plan through our communication channels and then work with our administration to integrate the strategic plan into our operational and planning processes for the upcoming corporate plan year. As noted, some of these items and actions are already underway or will continue to be evolving over the course of the next couple of years. So, some of those have already been built into our operational planning processes, but primarily some of the new and significant priorities that Council has identified will be brought forward for consideration in the corporate planning process, which will be presented to Council in November this year.
Okay. Councilor Pletchko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So a bit further question regarding what Councillor Matties has asked. What is the process if there wants to be word changes within this document?
The process for changing the plan itself or updating it? Pardon me?
Wordsmithing, for a lack of a better term. So if she was to want to add systems and process in there, what is the process for that?
I guess through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Pletchko, I think we can certainly wordsmith that before it's publicized. It would just delay the release of it to the public, just so that we have it finalized.
Is that a topic that needs to be discussed amongst all council members, or is that just directive of one individual?
Well,
It is a suggestion and is not a direction to change it, so unless there is a huge outcry or a motion to change it, I think council's better served our community as looking at the governance side of it, and does that one word make a difference in what we're talking about? If it does, then go ahead and make the motion to change it. If it doesn't, because we understand that, what it implies and stuff and what we're looking at, then we go ahead with our strategic plan, because again, we will review and update this again next year. This is a living document that continues to live and breathe as we complete projects. Some go off and more come on. And I've just taken a look at this, and I can see the stuff that we've just been presented with the storm management master plan. I can see that coming under supportive infrastructure and environmental responsibility next year as we continue to evolve and develop this. So I think there is time and opportunity later on. I don't think this is the opportunity to wordsmith anything. Councilor Matthews?
Through to you, just a last comment with regards to technology and systems. It's just that so much of what we do is impacted by that, and it does reflect the priority of our community to be on top of technology moving forward, and that we utilize it to be efficient and effective as a community. So that's all I was, if this reflects that and you feel confident with that, then that's fine. But
Okay. Thank you. Any more comments? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Next one, 9.5. Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I make a motion that Town Council accept the municipal development plan update report for information.
Okay, thank you very much. And go ahead, administration, with your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've begun the journey to update the municipal development plan, and this report here just outlines what administration has developed in terms of a strategic plan to make that happen. We've provided a little infographic there with the 4 different phases. Currently, we're working in the foundational work, which comprises of 3 separate streams. With council specifically, we'll be working with an external facilitator to go over the vision. We're also in the process of hiring some consultants to work on a policy analysis with the 4 areas that were revealed as part of the regional context statements, those being economic development, housing, agricultural lands, and environmental and sustainability areas. The 3rd area is just sort of a housekeeping or administrative update. So there's a variety of changes that have happened. Say, for example, the Capital Region Board is now known as the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board. There's certain maps, terms, and so forth that have changed over the last 5-6 years since it was passed. So those are things that administration will be looking at on our own. The 2nd phase is the conceptual work. So out of those 3 streams that were done as part of the 1st stage, we'll present those in sort of a conceptual form, both the council and then eventually public, just to make sure that before we go and make any changes to the documents and spend that time, and instead of redoing multiple drafts, we want to make sure that we have the at least conceptually built in an agreement with those ideas. Once that there concludes, we'll move into the drafting and refinement stage, at which point we will actually either internally or hire a graphic designer to produce a new version of the document. And once again, we will take that into the public and to council to look and make sure that everything there is what needs to be. If there's any additional revisions, make those revisions, and then enter this phase 4, which is the bylaw adoption process. So 1st, 2nd, 3rd reading and a public hearing. If council has any questions beyond what I've said, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. So members of council, have you read the update? So questions and comments regarding the update? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a general comment. I just wanted to thank administration for the work to date. The MDP is a very important document for our community, and as we've seen since our last MDP, a lot of things have changed, and I look forward to this process, and I'm very appreciative of the outline and giving us a good timeline as to what we can work towards. So thank you, and I look forward to working with you going forward on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Question, you mentioned like a visioning session with council that's been facilitated. Is there kind of a date that's kind of been earmarked? So council has a little bit of a heads up on when we can expect that?
The date that I've been given is May 6th is when we would be doing the first visioning session, and there may be a follow-up after that, but that's the first one that's currently scheduled.
Okay, thank you. So members of council, May 6th, keep that in your calendar free, please. Any other questions, comments? Okay, see none, thank you very much for the update. I do look forward to having this come forward as the updated model. I was not heavily involved in the plan in 2012, as I didn't sit on MPC, but I'm glad to see it coming to get changed a little bit and updated to the current standards. Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Moving on to 9.6, Tussocks. Councillor Pletchko, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Town Council authorized administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of a second public hearing to be held on April 23rd, 2019 for bylaw 2598/D&P/18 to adopt the Tussock area structure plan for the properties within south half section 30, 5227 West 4th of the Meridian.
Thank you very much. Administration, go ahead. We had a public hearing. We did some things. We sent them back. And why is this here again?
Thank you, Your Worship. So first reading was held on October 9th, followed by a second reading and a first public hearing on December 10th. There was a motion at that public hearing, or just after the second reading was given, to amend the high-density residential and commercial locations as per council's direction. Administration has worked with the developer to make those changes. We were in the process of sending it to the MRB, the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board, under the Regional Evaluation Framework. We did withdraw that application due to the changes, and we did resubmit. That application has now been approved with those changes as of March 20th. We are set to go for third reading on April 23rd, and just to ensure that we have full transparency and give the public the ability to comment on any of the changes that were made by the developer based on council's motion, we do recommend having a second public hearing. It would take place the same day. It would just require some additional advertisement, but again, this gives the opportunity to the public to provide comments on the revised plan. In addition to some map changes, there have been some text changes and an additional supplement to the TIA due to some changes in terms of the land uses and the densities throughout the plan.
Thank you for the explanation. Councillor Loy.
Yes, Your Worship, if I can just ask Mr. Dibble there, you said we're going to have a public hearing and then have what else on the same day?
It would be an opportunity for council to give the bylaw third reading as well. So the report isn't, there's intention to bring a third reading report regardless if there is going to be a public hearing or not, but this is an opportunity administration has given council to have a second public hearing, which again is what administration recommends for good public transparency.
Okay. So Councillor Loy, in terms of this area structure plan, we did a public hearing and that's all we're required to.
Yes.
But since we passed second reading and we gave direction to administration to work with the developer to change some of those highlighted areas between high density and commercial areas, administration feels that it is better before we approve third reading is to have another public hearing again to give the developer a chance to speak and also any residents that are affected to another opportunity to address council.
Yes, I understand that, Your Worship, but it sort of like appears to me that if we have a public hearing and then some mere hours later we do the final third reading, is that really giving our citizens ample and appropriate time to?
Yes, it is.
Well, I don't think it is. That's why I'm questioning it, because to me that's very short notice.
So
Why
if-
have it?
If Councillor Loy remembers, majority of the time we do a public hearing, second reading and third reading in the same night. Because once we have a public hearing, if we do not have the second or third readings, as a council, we are not allowed to talk to anybody in this municipality, administration, staff, or ourselves about this public hearing, period. So the process or the ability for us to contravene that is far greater than for us to deal with it.
I respect that, and pardon my ignorance, but I did not realize that we had public hearing, and then almost, for lack of better words, forthwith, we're passing it off. I thought a public hearing.
Yes, we've had this many times. This is actually an odd request that we have a second public hearing.
That part I understand, but, yeah, okay.
Right.
No,
If council goes back through all our minutes and for the last number of years, it has been first reading when we go and address the public and they get aware of what's happening. We do a public hearing, we listen to all sides, and at that time, usually we do second and third reading at the same time, so that we do not contravene ourselves and put us in hot water by talking to people about a development that has already had the public hearing.
yes, and you are correct. I was thinking of something else. Yeah, not a problem. I withdraw my comments.
Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. I was just going to add to your comments that for Deputy Mayor Loy, if our public, we have a public hearing, we hear the public and are swayed by their arguments, we vote afterwards, and it could be defeated. Or we can take note of their comments and their issues or their suggestions and pass it. So it does happen immediately right away. But again, our public will have a chance to see the changes that we've made, and hopefully that will quelch some of the issues that the public saw with the original plan.
Yes, and I thank you, Councillor Bennett. I did have the wrong process in my head when I was talking. I do apologize to all the council for that, and I was misleading you.
Thank you. There's Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, just in regards to your comment regarding additions to the traffic impact assessment, I'm just curious if those additions, are we going to see a new traffic impact assessment, or are we going to get possibly what I'm interested in is, are we going to get a count of the school traffic? Was one of the issues raised. The dates that they used for the previous traffic was basically an out-of-school day. And so I would like to know, are we going to see a traffic impact assessment where kids going to high school in that area will be counted?
Through your worship to Councillor Myers, I'm not 100% sure whether or not they did that, but my understanding is that they did address all of the various questions and issues that were raised during the first public hearing within the, I believe it's a memorandum to the original traffic impact assessment. So they've basically provided, I believe it's about a dozen-page sort of update to address any of those questions or concerns that were brought up.
Okay, just a follow-up comment. I'm not sure if it's necessarily appropriate or if you can pass it along, but I would be specifically looking for that when the report comes forward.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Matties?
Councillor Meyer.
Okay, and this is just to tell administration to do another public hearing. Right, you can ask that question to the developer.
That's why I say I'm not sure if it's appropriate if you can pass that along to the people.
Okay. Okay, any other questions regarding having the second public hearing? No, see none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to 9.7, letter of support for unification. Deputy Mayor, please.
Yes, Your Worship, that Town Council direct administration to submit a letter to the Stony Plain and District Chamber of Commerce and the Spruce Grove Chamber of Commerce in support of their proposed unification.
Okay. Sounds good. Administration, a little bit of background. I think council's aware of this.
Thank you, Worship. I don't have any significant comments to make other than what's been provided in the report. However, we'll indicate that the intent is to provide a general letter of support and encourage the process for regional collaboration with regards to business development and economic development activities in this manner.
Okay, thank you. And I hope if this does pass through, the work that we've done over the last 5 years trying to create a tri-reta that might come one step closer to reality. So maybe one question for administration. The letter of support for unification is for Stony Plain and District and just Spruce Grove. Does Spruce Grove have and District in their name, or they do not?
Your Worship, I'm not aware that that's the case, but we'll make sure that the letter is properly addressed to both chambers of commerce.
Okay. I was just wondering, because I thought I did see their name before. It said Spruce Grove and District. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I saw this item in our package, it made me kind of wonder, the actual vote is happening April 10th. So if our council gives its support to the unification, and to be honest, Mr. Mayor, I haven't heard both sides of the issue. I know our Chamber of Commerce has worked very hard on it, both of them, but even in talking to them, it's always been proposed unification. So if we give this letter of support to the unification, are we kind of putting in a vote before the actual vote and without really any information as to each side of this issue? We haven't heard the arguments for people who are against the unification. And truly, we haven't heard the arguments for the people who are for the unification. So I'm just wondering about giving a letter of support when personally I haven't had the opportunity to weigh each of them. And if you ask me today, if I had to vote at that April 10th meeting, I wouldn't know until I got there and could hear the arguments happening back and forth. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'm just concerned that we are issuing a letter of support to something that in my mind we haven't fully had information about.
Okay. Good points. I think it's been come up many times around the table and through the chambers. The chambers have had quite a few open houses with their members to discuss the pros and cons. Both chambers are recommending that they do proceed with this, and they're just looking for a letter of support. But when we get there on April 10th, if you have membership, you can vote either way that you want. Councillor Laurie?
Your Worship, my comments were going to echo yours, that the chambers have had many events over the last while, which have been fortunate enough to attend some of them, and the feedback on the unification has been very positive. There have been lots of discussions. I believe there was also a little bit of discussion in respect to that at the State of the Region address and so on and so forth. So I would support council submitting this letter to the chambers based on the information that I have from the events that I've attended.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Petchko?
So I can echo that as well. I've had several conversations with multiple people at the chamber levels, both Spruce Grove and Stony Plain, and it's pretty much a unanimous amongst them that they bring this forward to their members for a final vote on the unification side of it. One question I would have is this letter from council or is this letter from the mayor? And the reason I ask that is in the last few letters that I've seen of support that have gone out has not been from council, has been from the mayor specific. So I'm just concerned that if we're sending this letter out, that this become a letter that goes out to the chamber that's supported by mayor and council.
Yeah, Your Worship, I can maybe just comment on that briefly. So typically, when a letter like this is, brought forward into the council chambers and a resolution is passed by council, it typically will reference that somewhere within the letter. Again, the mayor's signature and name will be on it, but there's typically some wording in there that indicates a resolution was passed by council and so on and so forth, which I guess implicit or implied is that it's written on behalf of all of council. And now that I think about some of the wording, will say on behalf of council, I'm sending this letter. Sometimes it may not say that, but typically anything that comes from the council chamber is implied that it's coming from all of council.
Okay, yes. And so the difference of letter of support, because this is coming before council, so the request is that I have support of council to write this. I can write letters of support for many things, such as grant applications, stuff that do not come from council, because that's just something that we do. We don't need to bog down our process. Something that's larger like this, I feel more comfortable with a letter of support that has been supported by members of council. I'm pretty sure you guys don't want to see all the little letters of support for this grant here, this grant there, and can you support our little thing here? Well, those things are at the privy of the mayor. And so is this, but this has a lot more significant value to our region and how we're going to move forward in terms of economic impact to our communities. Councilor Bennett?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. It's just troubling me a little bit. If we submit a letter of support, then the members who have to vote on April 10th, realizing that the municipalities are supporting it, is that going to sway their vote? And so that it's not a true justification one way or the other.
I don't think so, but administration have anything to comment? In terms of, does this this might skew the vote if we have a letter of support?
I don't know, Your Worship, if I can speak to that directly. What I will comment that, over the course of the past, it's been 2 to 5 years sort of thing that this conversation has been going on. I know that without adopting a formal policy of such, council in the past has has taken the position on this entire process that until such time as the Stony Plain Chamber of Commerce, meaning the Stony Plain Chamber of Commerce Board, was prepared to enter into this sort of agreement, that the town frankly did not take a position. And I know we had been asked in past comments and discussion and so on. But again, the idea or the notion or the understanding at the time was generally that until such time as the Stony Plain and District Chamber of Commerce Board saw fit that this was a direction they would see them going in as an organization, at that time, then council would be prepared to support the chamber board. So, maybe one way of looking at this, Your Worship, is that what council is being asked to support is the direction that's being provided by the Stony Plain and Chamber District Board towards the unification vote. The board itself is supporting this, is driving it, frankly, and what council is being asked through this is to provide that support to the board. Whether that sways votes, makes an impact on voting, so on and so forth, I don't know if I'd put comment to that.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Fletcher?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. But just curious, this motion that has come forward, has that been a request that the Chamber of Commerce has made? Where has this come from?
Your Worship, this is brought forward. I had spoken with the president of the Spruce Grove Chamber of Commerce during the regional, the tri-region state of the region. And he had asked directly for me if there would be any chance of council looking to support this. At that point in time, again, I had said, well, our council had always taken a sort of non-position until such time as the Stony Plain board was going to see fit to move this forward. And as such, that is the case now. That's why it was brought forward.
And has that been has this been brought forward to all 3 municipalities, or actually there'll be 4 that are involved in this?
Has that
I'm not sure, Your Worship, if it's going forward in this matter to whether Parkland County, Wavam, or Spruce Grove.
I'm just wondering if we can have a friendly amendment here. I would just feel so much more at ease if this motion could say that Town Council direct administration to support the recommendation of the Stony Plain and District Chamber of Commerce. Somehow put in there that we are supporting the recommendation that our Chamber of Commerce has asked us to. That, to me, makes it more of a very specific, we are supporting their recommendation. This isn't something we've come up on just our own, that Town Council direct administration to submit a letter. It's saying that Town Council direct administration to submit a letter to support the recommendation of the Stony Plain District Chamber of Commerce Board.
Okay. You know what? Let's just end this quickly. We have Sarah Perry there and the ED of the Stony Plain Chamber of Commerce. Can I ask you to come forward and provide some of your thoughts on this? Because obviously Councillor Bennett has misgivings that this is not the direction of the Stony Plain Chamber. And if you can provide some clarity on that and the direction of your board, that will give Council some clarity.
I want to add one thing.
Okay.
I noticed that Tom made mention too that this was the Spruce Grove Chamber of Commerce that asked you to make this recommendation. That has me a bit concerned when this is the Stony Plain and District Chamber of Commerce that is actually the ones that should be asking for us to do that, not the previous chamber that is looking to do something with it. So I tend to agree a bit more with Ms. Bennett now that you know, maybe there is more to this that we should be looking at prior to any recommendations coming forward. If our own chamber hasn't asked us to come forward and support something like this, I have a bit of a concern with that.
Okay, and that's why I see Ms. Perry was in the audience, so I'll ask her to come forward. And thank you for that. Hi, how are you doing? Welcome to council, because this is the first time you've actually come to council. We've actually had a chance to talk.
So the track committee that's made up of the Stony Plain Chamber, Spruce Grove, Wobberman and the region of Parkland had a meeting with Parkland County, and that is where Dave Groban has obviously come forward out of that committee and asked Mr. Goulden directly about a letter of support. But obviously, as the committee, we would look to yourselves for a letter of support, as we have done from Parkland County and Spruce Grove. So I don't think there's anything underhand in that. Dave Groban happened to be the person that came forward to speak to Tom. Sorry, Mr. Goulden. I think that's just the way it happened. And like I say, we are looking support from all three municipalities in moving forward with the unification vote. And we see it as our members will make their own minds up. Obviously, there are some members that would look to yourselves as elected officials to provide a level of support as well in their own decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Meyer, thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Worship. And Ms. Carey? Perry, sorry, I was going to say, I know it's Sarah. I finally remembered it. Just because I have heard so much in favor of this unification vote, could you, I mean, it'd be kind of like arguing for the other side, but if you could share maybe what some people may, what would stop someone or some of the concerns against this might be.
Certainly, Councillor Mayor. I haven't heard anything personally, bearing in mind I've only been here since December the 17th. But in terms of the the general feeling, if somebody is concerned, is about the retaining the uniqueness of both chambers. And that's one thing that we have at the top of our priority list in terms of not just bringing two chambers of commerce together and making a new chamber, but really understanding and recognising the uniqueness of the two communities and what we need to offer them, and really outreach to the regional members, like the rural members. Both chambers, we don't have a great deal of rural members. Especially those that are successful. They tend to not become chamber members because they believe that we don't offer something to them. But yeah, really the only concern that has been raised through the town hall meeting and subsequent surveys has been around the concern of not being swallowed up by a larger chamber, and just remember to keep the focus on the uniqueness of the two communities in particular in the first phase, and then as we move into the second phase, understanding the community of Wabamun as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's at your ease, Councillor Bennett. Okay. Yes, thank you very much,
Okay.
Ms. Mayor. Okay. So that's CRBs. We don't need no wordsmithing of the motion. No, I'm asking if you want to wordsmith it.
No.
Okay, because we already have the motion.
We already had a motion.
Okay, so if no word. Go ahead, Councillor Matthews.
Through to Councillor Bennett, what we're doing today is, I mean, we're going to have a vote as a council, and so this would show our support. You know, in terms of the direction. If we didn't do this tonight, then what is the direction that we would? No, but what would be the direction that we would have then, right? Because this is one vote or one commitment to a group that has recommended that we go ahead with this as a community. Like, I'd 100% support this.
Thank you. And I just have one thought here, because we're writing a letter of support, and the unification meeting and the AGM is on April 10th. Would it be prudent of us as a council to add a additional clause on there that says that we direct the town manager to vote a one share positively? So yes. That sets a very clear signal, because if we don't, the town manager that will be voting our share has the option of voting yes or no. Can I have an amendment, please? Councillor Lloyd, would you make that friendly, because that's your motion?
Yes. Yes, I support that wholeheartedly.
Okay.
As you say, to add that particular clause, that the town manager does vote in support.
In support of the unification vote on April. Okay.
Yeah, in support of the unification.
Okay, and so it's on there? Okay, so council, you just have to trust that they changed it, because I don't think they've updated the screen. But okay, with that, any other conversation or debate or comment? With that, thank you very much. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Moving on to 9.8, 2018 year-end capital projects. Councilor Pletchko, please.
That council approves additional funding in the amount of $106,772.80 to fund the capital project overages from the following reserves: $23,712.81 from the Legacy Reserve, internal borrowing, $39,194.99 from the Policing and Public Safety Reserve, and $43,865 from the Utility Rate Stabilization Reserve.
Sounds good. Go ahead, administration, for your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is just part of our year-end wrap-up. And so there was a few capital projects that were over budget during the year that council was made aware of. And so we're just coming for the authorization of the funding from reserves, which council must do, so that we can include that in the December 31st audited financial statements, which are scheduled to come to you at the end of April, on April 23rd. So all these projects were listed in the quarterly 4 update to council. And I think that you are familiar with the majority. The one that might be not as prevalent because it was smaller was an emergency authorized by the town manager on a storm catch basin. And so we're asking for a funding source of the utility rate stabilization reserve on that one. And we can answer any questions on the other two, but I think council's aware of those two as well.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, you've read the agenda package. As mentioned by administration, we know the first two, but the third one was kind of new to us, so questions and comments regarding that. Councilor Laurie.
Your Worship, a question to administration in respect to the second item, the traffic light item. I know we did discuss this again, and the overage that's being requested is $39,194.99. However, the actual cost of what was missed was at $109,886 for the burying of the overhead power lines at 49th Avenue. So without that, this project was slated to come in at approximately $70,000 under budget. I'm just wondering if administration can provide any context as to what is going to be done in the future to prevent oversight such as this on projects, to prevent unnecessary cost overruns.
Your Worship, I guess this goes down to project management and our working with our consultants on each stage of the project to look at some of these kind of details, which sometimes can slip through the cracks. So our project managers having the time and the resources to work with the consultants that we work with to execute the projects and try to get them done, so these overages do not happen.
I think, to your worship, I'll add, and I'm not sure if our general manager, well, I know it wasn't here for the vast majority of this project, but we also did have a write-down in the engineering costs associated with the project as a result of, frankly, what we felt was an oversight by our engineering firm. I don't recall the number off the top of my head as to what it was, but it did. We ended up having some of our billing reversed as well through this project as a result of that. So, you know, along those lines, as well as what our general manager has said, you know, I mean, there are times where we go back and say this wasn't acceptable, and that's another way to keep that in check, or to keep that from happening again.
For sure. And just a further comment, Your Worship?
Yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate that administration worked with the engineering firm for a write-down on that. Obviously, I don't think it would be responsible for the town of Stony Plain to take the full weight of that. I want to shed light on this, and I want to bring this forward. The term "slip through the cracks" was mentioned. I mean, $109,000 was 20% of a budget for 2 sets of traffic lights. That's a pretty big oversight, and so I'm glad to hear that we've had some actions taken. I'm glad to hear that there was some shared responsibility with the engineering firm, and hopefully we can seal up those cracks and make sure these type of errors don't happen in the future.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Pletchko? No? Okay. Any more questions regarding that? Okay, the mention of the storm catch basin that was approved by the town manager, was that included in the storm management master plan that was just completed?
Your Worship, this took place last year, so it was a repair that had already taken place. So I understand there was some undercutting behind the barrel of the catch basin, which meant that this was required. So I guess to put this in the perspective of the report you saw today, did an asset inventory of these types of assets, which would enable us to start to program them ahead of time and try to get ahead of some of these in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Nope. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. And that ends our business items. So moving on to council information and council discussion. And tonight we'll start with Councilor Laurie.
Just a couple of things. First, through you to administration, we've had mention about crosswalk and sign inventory and coming up with a bit of a standard. I believe there was supposed to be some type of a report developed on that. I'm just wondering if we can get an update as to where we're at in that process and what, if anything, council can expect to see from that.
Thank you.
Your Worship, members of council, we have had staff out doing some inventory, and then as you saw earlier in your strategic plan, it's one of those items. So certainly you'll see some costing coming back as an initiative for future years, unless we can do it in-house in existing budgets.
And as a follow-up to that as well, I've noticed with the installation of the new traffic lights on the 5th Meridian, there is a lighted overhead crosswalk sign that will be coming down. Obviously not sure on the ownership stake of this or how it may be used. There's 2 areas within town that I've personally identified as areas I think we could use those, one being at Golf Course Road north of the CN tracks and another one on 44th Avenue at 28th Street. I'm just wondering if this is something that can be considered or something that can be potentially worked with Alberta Transportation, since these crossing lights will be removed, and whether there is a possibility for us to retain ownership and utilize them within our community to potentially reduce the cost of some of these future improvements to crosswalks.
Worship, to answer that question, we'll contact Alberta Transportation to find out what their plans are for these items and to see if there's any opportunity there.
Thank you. And one more, Your Worship. In response to our strategic plan that we saw tonight, there was specific mention of working with CN Rail. I'm hoping administration can provide me an update. We understand that we have had some difficulties with our continued conversations with CN Rail since the completion of their project, particularly given that their manager of public affairs for Alberta no longer exists, and that position no longer exists, and there's been some organization and structural changes. Sitting in a presentation with Sean Finn from CN last year, he said within 5 years he wanted to come to every community that CN was in and have them be proud to have CN in their community. With the continued struggles that we've had and the continued problems that we've had in getting contact, have we received confirmation of another meeting with Mr. Finn or with CN at the upcoming FCM conference?
I think that letter went out a couple weeks ago. We received the response.
That's correct, Your Worship. We have sent the letter to Mr. Finn to have a follow-up conversation and fill some of the gaps in communication that we've had that have lapsed with CN Rail. We haven't had a response yet, but we'll continue to pursue conversations with them, and certainly we have identified the FCM conference as an opportunity to make sure we can have that conversation with them, because they do have a presence at that event, and we will ensure that that happens.
For sure.
Your Worship, maybe I'll just ask our General Manager to, I believe our Member of Parliament is now somewhat more actively engaged with rail safety.
Yes, so we had a meeting with our MP, Dane Lloyd, last week, and one of the things that was noted was that he is now one of the co-chairs of the committees related to rail line and federal government interactions, and so it was a great opportunity for us to share with him our concerns and communication challenges with CN Rail. So he was actively interested in that, and so we will continue to copy our MP on correspondences with CN Rail to ensure that he's very much aware of our current requests for dialogue.
Excellent. Thank you very much, administration. And just a note, when we do have those lines of dialogue opened, I have noticed another spike in the increase of trains stopped across crossings in town, as well as some very slow-moving trains. It's understandable that this will happen on occasion, but it seems to have hit another little bit of an increase. So if we might be able to get an update from CN as to if there is something that is impacting the train traffic through the community on that as well, would be appreciated.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor,
that's all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More and more often now, I'm having residents ask me about the new recycling limits. People are getting quite upset when they go to recycle, especially their plastics that they've always been allowed to recycle, and now they're finding out that they can't recycle them anymore. So I go into my explanation of how recycling is a commodity, we have to have buyers, I do the whole spiel, but they just look at me like, you know, like they don't understand what I'm saying. I do the same with glass. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering, number one, when we are going to officially, I don't think I've heard that officially, which plastics are not being recycled anymore. I've heard unofficially it's the clamshell, so plastic that has the plastic top on it. I'm not sure about yogurt containers. I'm not sure about a lot of them. So I'm wondering when we are going to officially make those announcements about the changes in recycling. And as you know, Mr. Mayor, I did attend the spring convention of RAM, and they had a session called From Trash to Treasure, a recycling update in Alberta. And I found it really quite informative for myself, mostly because they talked about exactly what I was trying to explain to residents. And it was actually our service provider, Lorenzo, who was there, and he had a way of explaining exactly what was happening in China and why it's changed and what can be accepted and what can't be accepted. And I was just thinking that since he is our service provider, is there a way that we could get him out to speak to our community and try to explain some of these changes, and maybe even to launch a new educational process on what changes in our recycling program? Also, another speaker, this was a panel, the other speaker was Christine Seidel, and I know that Councillor Matties has talked about her quite a bit. She's with the Alberta Plastic Recycling Association, and she talked a lot about the EPA. And so, yeah, EPA. So it was kind of a good news. You know, this is what we could do to eliminate the problem of recycling and where it can go, would be with the extended producer responsibilities. So that was the good news, and Lorenzo was the bad news, exactly why we can't recycle these things anymore. So I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could maybe launch an educational program and invite those speakers to either come to council and talk to us and explain, or to do it as a public, again, a public engagement.
Okay, good question. I think the last update was that staff were working with Evergreen for a contract and how this all unrolls. From the last that I've heard, April 1st is the date that will be presented to council. Okay, and that will help with the education and update of everything as well. I just went to my waste app, and it still says plastics 1 to 7 is accepted, and we know that's not true anymore. So that all needs to be corrected. But at first, we wanted to come before council with the whole explanation of what's accepted, what's not, and how we go forward in terms of education and notifying our residents. General Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, April 1st is the kickoff of our launch of our campaign, so it's starting next Monday.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor?
At this point.
Okay, Councillor Meyer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just an opportunity to point out the obvious. So it's springtime, and houses are going up for sale again, and so at this time I imagine we have some new potential residents kicking around our town. So I'm curious, it's kind of a twofold thing. Curious to see when we are going to get the street sweepers out there to start cleaning up. And at the same time, it also draw attention to, now that it's spring, we once again have a mud hole in our park as people come into town. And I'd just like to tie the two ideas that, you know, if we're trying to attract new residents into town, it does look not so good. And if we're going to put up the skating park every winter, which I support, we need to find a solution for that, because it doesn't look well.
Okay. So the Rotary Park has been touched on by administration. They'll continue to make adjustments for that to see how that works. What about the street cleaning? Because I believe this is a lot sooner than we normally street clean because we've had abnormally warm weather. Has adjustments been made on the schedule to provide street cleaning sooner?
Your worship, I mean, we're still dealing with runoff and things like that, so it's a little bit early. Things have to dry out a little bit before we could go wholeheartedly into the spring cleaning. But you can rest assured we do not. It's all based on the weather and the timing, based on what we see out there in relation to the roads and the ditches, etc.
Okay. That's your question?
No, but I get it. It's based on weather.
Yes. Okay, anything else?
Oh.
Okay, Councilor Pletchko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Well, first things first, I just want to thank Council for allowing me to be away for a GCC meeting and a Council meeting to attend the Utility Management Conference, which was down in Nashville, part of the commission that I sit on, which is the wastewater. It was a great conference to attend, took in some opportunities to talk about succession planning for our communities, as well as how to handle crisis situations that come up in our community with our own social media, rather than going out to the media, and how to control that type of thing. So a good conference, stuff that I will like to be able to bring back to some of the strategic planning sessions and stuff like that. So I look forward to being able to do that. I do have a few questions regarding our community. And yes, I know that spring is not here yet. We're slated for some snow here later this month yet. I think we're jumping the gun a little bit. However, I do have a question that relates to potholes within our community. And I'm not talking 779, 628, or any of the major sections that are owned by the province. I'm talking within our community. What do we have in place that will address those problems as they arise, as there is many holes within our community roads that we have today?
Your Worship, through to you, Councillor Pletchko. So we have done some potholes already, and I guess we'll continue to get the worst situations under control. Depending on the water and the weather, it's difficult to have them last. So you won't see the full scale good product you will see later in the season. So these are pretty much Band-Aid solutions to get us through the season until the weather improves. So but we've done some of this already, and we'll continue to get the worst areas under control. So if there are things that you notice and you wish to bring to my attention, our people are on top of them, so we'll be sure to add them to the list.
So for our community, is there a way that we can recommend to them that they are able to communicate with our department here to update that portion of it?
Yes, they can contact our Public Works Department, who will then prioritize them based on the resources and priority.
Thank you. Further on that is lights, the new 3 lights on 779. I do understand that those lights are our provincial governments. However, they have me a bit concerned, and I've heard several people within our community a bit concerned with them. The lights are far to the west side, and on the east side, they correspond with the lanes that are there. And when you're coming, the lights are not far enough over on the far to the east side for both lanes. So it doesn't really designate what the lanes are. And I'm wondering if we can have a bit of a conversation with transportation to either put signs up that say new lights, new intersections, that type of thing, or this is the lane designated for that light up there, because when they're flashing today, it will be very soon that they're flashing red and going through the sequence, and a bit of a concern for the safety within the community.
Thank you. We'll bring that forward to them. Yep.
Okay. Range Road 12. Just wondering when the last time somebody from the town drove down that road. The west side on the top of the hills have all completely washed away, and there's big potholes where if somebody hits it with a car at nighttime, it might be a concern for us. So if we can get somebody from town up there to possibly put a sign up or something along them ways. And the other, last but not least, is 779 and 628. If we can have another conversation with Alberta Transportation, the lights at that corner are very long and short. So when I say that, it stays green for a long time heading from 779 both north and south, but coming from the east and west, that light stays red forever.
Okay, so that's cycling.
Yeah. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Loy, anything to add?
Yes, Your Worship. I think 5 out of the 6 topics I had here have been touched on the way down. So for Councillor Maddies, we might as well just leave, I guess, because there's nothing left. No, stick around. Some of the items I just want to bring to administration's thing there. I drove on Boulder Boulevard, and I've mentioned quite a few times the Clearwater watering plant there and the main road out in front of it. It is, every year, it seems to be deteriorating more and more and more. And I think it was my first or second year on council that we spent over, what, $7 million to fix that area up, and it's deteriorating fast. So I just bring that to your attention. I always have concerns about it. Mr. Mayor, I attended the Northern Alberta Mayors and Reeves Caucus there last week for you. Really, there was nothing to report. They were just talking about the upcoming provincial election, and they had candidates there from the various parties, plus they had a panel, so nothing to report there. On 779 highway planning and infrastructure, I see them putting in new, I guess, standards or for light standards or crossing things. I'm not sure exactly what they are on the east side of the road. Can you just fill me in as to, because they appear to me not to be really close to an intersection, almost too far in between intersections, so I'm kind of lost.
They're lights?
They are lights.
Yes, they're actually overhead lights.
Now that I have that in mind, I'll drive by that and prepared for the next go round, because it just seems to be. That's why I'm not an engineer, sir. The other thing I have is 44th Avenue. Over the course of years, it's taken a real bad beating. It is one of the major arterial roads between the east and the west part of our town. On the north end, do we have sort of like a bit of a plan when that will be upgraded? I don't know whether the asphalt on there is standard for an arterial road or what that's classified as, but I would just bring that to administration's attention that we're not that far away from having that totally seriously looked at. And last but not least, today I went to cross the tracks, and there was a train eastbound, and then within seconds there was a train westbound, and then the crossing gates, of course, did not go up. And I just thought, is it possible that if we did approach CN, until we actually get an overpass or an underpass or whatever it happens to be, that if they could schedule their train so if there's one going, let's say westbound, that before the next eastbound train crosses, so we have a double crossing at the time, there could be a 2 or 3 minute delay, that they either slow one of those trains down or speed the other up, just to allow, in the case of an ambulance, fire's one thing, a house can burn down, but we can replace it. But if there's an ambulance that has to get through there and somebody dies because it can't get through, it's just maybe I'm pie in the sky thinking, but it'd be something that maybe when we're talking to Mr. Lloyd, if that's possible, to sync that. And that's all I have, Your Worship.
That's good. Thank you for bringing that up. Did you just recall by how long that was?
No, I have a new watch now that doesn't work. It doesn't have a stopwatch on it. So, but it was long. That train was very long, and I would say the last 3 or 4 cars that went by, all of a sudden I see the other eastbound train going through it, and it was equally as long. So probably a good 10 minutes or better.
Okay. Thank you.
It was just a thought. If they could coordinate it, at least it allows an ambulance to get through.
Okay. Sounds good. or they can speed it up so they go at the same time.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Matthews?
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to speak on a couple of issues, one that's a broader community issue and one that's specific to the downtown. So first of all, when I went to the Opioid Information and Awareness Summit on March 14th, we had Dr. Robert Tangwe, who's a medical doctor and a psychiatrist in specializing in addiction and pain management, speak to us. And he discussed, first of all, that, I mean, basically there's this very serious problem with regards to opioid addiction. He spoke about how small the health budget is when we're talking about pain management, mental health, and addiction. And also, gave us a good overview of the history and marketing of opioids and how this problem has presented itself in our communities. There is a 25% chance that if somebody is taking an opioid, that they will be addicted to it. And then from there, when we look at the rates that just are never ending, they just keep increasing. So in 2018, we had 591 people die of fentanyl-related deaths in Alberta, and a total of 746 opioid deaths. Again, increased over the prior year in 2017. My point is this evening that this is a community issue, and is there a way that we can advocate as a community working together to start really considering what is the issue in our community and how do we best address it? And he gives us some good recommendations for that. I'm not going to go into details with it now, but it is important that we work as a community to make sure that as we're dealing with opioid, people that are addicted to opioids, that there is an effective mechanism to help them. So that was my first comments. My second comments are related to the downtown. And I had the opportunity to meet with representatives from 6 businesses last week. And there were some comments that were made, and I just want to make sure that we're considering them as we move forward with the additional 2 phases that we have. So first of all, one comment was that the planters, even though they are not making the intersections smaller, appear larger. And what I was told is that the business owner I was speaking to was informed by people that shop in her place that they have hit the planters. And so we have a high senior population in the community, and just wondering if there's a possibility of maybe making these planters a little bit lower so they don't appear as big. So just a thought. Secondly, the comment was that the lights are too tall downtown, that we're losing the downtown community feel with these big tall lights. Third, that the sidewalk is now narrower, and the reason that it's narrower is because you have to navigate between the lights and the bollards. And the comment was that a wheelchair can get through there, but that if you're trying to access, for example, for deliveries from a front door access, because some businesses don't have the back access, that it's very difficult to get the deliveries. Of course, people talked about the shoveling around the bollards was causing businesses to have more work. The stamped sidewalk is slippery and needs to be addressed. And my comment is that there were some common issues cited by all of them, and we just want to make sure that we are sending effective responses back to the business community and users of the downtown.
Thanks for bringing that forward, Councilor Matthews. And I believe staff have been going to the businesses to chat with them. So will that be continuing in phase 3 and 4 as well? Because of phase 2, there was a lot of engagement from our staff and the contractors with the business owners.
Yes, Your Worship, we are engaged. We did have a recent meeting with all of the downtown businesses in phase 3 of the project, and council will be getting an update on this project in 1 week. Our engineering consultant will be here to present to you and discuss the project phase 3 and 4 at that time. So I guess we'll have some more answers and some more. I mean, there are. I guess the way I would characterize this, there are some things we can do, some things we can't do that are impractical to do. But again, we're doing everything practical and reasonable to try to address concerns. And so an update of that will come next week.
Your Worship, I think too, if I can just quickly add, any downtown project is going to be challenging in certain ways, and whether it's disruptive or to particular businesses or just to the general public who are used to going downtown and so on and so forth. One of the main things that we have to all do is the communication and the engagement side, because there's often a lot of questions. There's often very clear and simple answers for those questions that we can provide, or our staff can provide, or we can provide to council and council can provide. But in a community our size, a downtown like ours, generally people have a lot of pride in. It's just important. The bottom line, I think, is important for all of us to just remember that the engagement, the communication is probably the most important part of the majority of the project, so to speak, just to keep our ears open and be able to answer questions when they come up. And so I would encourage, I guess the point of this is encourage council, if you're, if you're hearing this or you're hearing that or certain common themes, just let us know and we can adjust some of our communication moving forward to maybe hit those spots as well. So.
That's good. And also, you can also direct those questions or those individuals to the staff directly, because I'm sure the staff will be more than happy to answer some questions and provide some information. Anything else, Councilor Matthews? Okay. I think what I had for council discussion, street cleaning, that answered that question. Thank you for bringing that up. Potholes, I'd like to say thank you for fixing those potholes on 49th Avenue, even though I was stuck behind the truck filling them. I did appreciate them because the next time I drove on them it was a lot better, so appreciate that the staff is doing that. And I had questions regarding downtown phase 3, but I hear that we're getting a presentation next week on the 1st, so that's good. And members of council, if you sign up for the AUMA Spring Leaders Caucus, that's the 27th, 28th. And if you are there, we'll see you there. If not, enjoy whatever you're doing, and we'll discuss what we learn after that. As well as the Culture Forward is on the 27th, so if we make it back, that is happening over at Chop Physique Fitness down on the old IJ Mall, so if people are around. With that, that's it. Thank you, administration, for the reports. Members of council, thank you for reading the packages and providing good discussion and conversation around the issues that we have to look at governance in our community. With that, the council is adjourned.